And welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 90. Woo! And on the show today, our second video presentation, we have the legendary Jerry Beck.
That's me.
How are you today?
I'm doing fine. I want to get Casper in the picture here. Here we go. Just for you, Mark. Just for the Harveyville fun times. All the Harveyville fun times that I've had. Doesn't make any sense anyway.
So as I usually do on every one of these shows, I usually say, tell us a little bit about yourself. And in your case, I know you have a lot of interest, but we'll start off with animation because that's what you're best known for. How you got interested in animation.
Oh, I feel like I've told this story before, and I probably have. So I hope if there's anybody watching, I hope it's not going to bore you again. Kid, I was a kid. I was in school. I loved comic books. I got into comic books, when I was like, I now realize I got into it later than a lot of other people. Like I was 8 years old, 1963. I'll give out my dates and years and all that stuff. But 63 was the first year I even saw a comic book. And I was 8 years old, and I loved them. I got into Superman right away, and DC and Marvel about a year later. But I just love it, and I wanted to draw. I just sort of the thing I wanted to be an artist and draw. I thought that would be a good job. Somehow I had that thought in my mind, and so I drew a lot as a kid, and I wanted to be a cartoonist, and back in those days, everybody forgets, this is the 60s and the 70s even. Reading comic books when you were older than a certain age, you were looked at as a pretty silly, I could use worse words. People really looked down at you that, you were like, something was wrong with you if you still not only read comic books, but watched cartoons. Because nobody remembers this, but 1968, 9, the 70s, it was, unless, and I heard Danny Fingeroth on one of your previous podcasts talk about going to the 1970 Comic-Con. In 1968, when I was 13, I went to the first Phil Seuling Comic-Con. I happened to be lucky enough to live in New York City, and in Queens in my case. And, my grandmother found an article about this comic book convention that was going on, and she was reading the Saturday newspaper. And I was reading it like, what's the, the next day on Sunday, with a few dollars in my pocket, I went to this Statler Hilton in Manhattan. And I remember the elevator door opening, and I seeing a dealer's room and seeing boxes of old comic books and fanzines and things. And I'm like, holy shit. I mean, at 13, I found my world. This is my universe. And I still wanted to be a comic book artist, but in the next few years, going to high school, getting fanzines is the only thing that kept me alive. Those were my lifeline. We didn't have the internet back then. We didn't, it was a different world. So I wanted to be, I started watching cartoons when I came home from school. Bugs Bunny and Casper were on in New York back to back. Casper at, I think, 3 or 3:30 and Bugs Bunny at 3:30 or 4 or something like that. And I watched those things while I was working. I couldn't believe, I couldn't imagine, how do you take something that's drawing and have it move and talk? It just was an unimaginable thing. I got into figuring that out. I also began to realize in my teenage years that the animation was funny, and at least in the case of the Warner Brothers cartoons. I thought they were really, really funny, and I was beginning to get all the jokes I never got before when I watched these. Yeah. So I got really interested in the cartoons, and the thing is, back then, this is the mid 70s, early 70s, there were no books. There was no books. There was no internet. There was nowhere to go to learn what was the name of that cartoon I just saw. How many were there? Who directed these? Who made them? There was nowhere to go. The closest thing was Mike Barrier with Funny World. Funny World.
I didn't even know about that.
So. Funny World came out in, the famous, he started doing those in the 60s. I didn't know about this then, but in a part of Kappa Alpha. And then the 12th issue, which I think was 1970, was the famous Bob Clancy. He instantly went from a crummy mimeographed fanzine to a professional typeset, beautiful magazine called Funny World. And that alone was something to be in awe of. I remember I was at a creation convention in 1972, I think it was, could have been 73, might have been 72, and somebody was selling I think it was the 13th issue, which is the one that has Chuck Jones, big interview with Chuck Jones, and there's a Carl Stalling interview in it.
Yep.
And the magazine cover says, or on the back cover, it says, interview with Chuck Jones, Carl Stalling, and it's a professional looking magazine. And I kept thinking, there's a magazine that has interviews with Carl Stalling. Who in the world knows who that is, unless you're watching these cartoons? Anyway, I bought that thinking there's a world out there that is into this. And but it was really just Mike Barrier and the few people who read Funny World. And most of those people were reading it because he was talking about Karl Barks and stuff like that. And I ate that up completely, and I was a little bit of a minor pen pal with him, but not quite. But anyway, I got into the history of animation. I started going to School of Visual Arts in New York. I wanted to be an animator after high school. And the problem is, in the mid-'70s, as we know, that was the nadir, if that's the right word. Is nadir the right word? I think it's the opposite. Yeah. What's the opposite of nadir, though? It's the bottom. The bottom.
Nadir's the bottom, yeah. The peak is the other, or whatever.
Okay, nadir.
The climax or the
nadir is
summit.
The word.
Nadir is the bottom, yeah.
Okay, it's the nadir. I had the right word in the first place.
Yes.
The nadir. It's the nadir of the animation universe. I mean, except for Patty Freeling, except for, I mean, really, even Walter Lantz had given up. I mean, there was no animation happening. Disney was still making stuff like the Aristocats and Robin Hood, which I think are the worst, or some of the worst of the Disney animated. That's me. The Hanna-Barbera had started farming out animation to Australia and Japan and whatever. So the thing is, animation looked awful. That was on Saturday morning. The new theatricals that were being made were bad. The only highlight, if you want to call it that, was Ralph Bakshi and Fritz the Cat. And heavy traffic. There was really not much going on in the animation universe. And Walt Disney had died. There was no leader for animation.
Yeah.
So it was just an unusual period. And to get a job in animation, which I was trying to do, was an impossibility, because the people from the golden age were still around. Maybe they were in their 50s and 60s or so. They were still working. Right. And I was in New York. And weirdly enough, there was a big animation industry in New York, as well as in LA, of course, but there was still a thriving, somewhat, thriving is not the right word, but there was still a lot of animation studios like Xander, and there was a bunch of them, and they made commercials like, I still remember the Freakies. You remember that cereal, the Freakies? Oh, yeah. We are the Freak. That commercial was made in New York, the Xander animation parlor. I remember when that commercial came on, like, it blew my mind. It's like, whoa, Phil Animation. It was fantastic looking, So things like that. But to get a job working, you had to be amazingly good, and even those people had a hard time getting a job. I know I'm digressing, but I'll end with this. At that point, I actually became friends with Eric Goldberg and Tom Cito. They were actually either in class with me, or Eric was kind of floating around, and they were but they were both great animators. And Dan Haskett, who's working on the Looney Tunes cartoons right now, one of the best animators ever in the business, whether you know his name or not, is amazing. Guy's been around. These people were fantastic. They were young then, and they couldn't get a job. It was very, very difficult to get in, and I couldn't draw anything like these guys. Yeah. So I sort of had this big epiphany with myself, which was, I can't get into the field I'm interested in. I wasn't sure what to do. And I decided to do two things. One was, there was no books on animation history. There was nothing, no research, nothing going on. So this is now I'm getting to answering your question. So this is around 1974. Yeah, definitely. 73, 74, around that period. And I thought, I'm going to research it, just on the side. And meanwhile, I had a fluky, lucky, wonderful situation where I started getting a job. I worked in Wall Street, and I was doing junk. I couldn't care less about. I was just doing a job. It was just a job to pay the rent, kind of a thing, when I was young. And I I found out I was working like in what they called the computer room, because people didn't have computers on their desks back in the 70s, but
Right,
we did
right.
have a big, massive computer floor. In most big companies did, and they would generate reports, and then I was just a clerk. I worked in the computer room. I fed the cards to the machine. I would hand the reports to the executives. I did stuff like that. But that led me to getting a similar job like that with United Artists. United Artists, amazingly, was located in New York, not LA. And they had a whole building, 729 7th Avenue. I later found out that was where the Van Buren studios were back in the 30s. And across the street was 1600 Broadway, which is where Fleischer was back in the 30s. And so that was kind of cool. And I ended up, so I got this great job at United Artists in the computer room first, but that led me to, they had luckily job openings in other departments, and I had to get out of that. And I ended up in the 16 millimeter department, which was a department that rented films to, schools and hospitals and prisons and things like that. But it was a great place for me to be for a variety of reasons, which I may or may not go into or get into there. But that's how I had an epiphany. I had to figure out what I was going to do for a living in this world. And so I got this job at a movie distribution place, and which led to a lot of things in my life later. But meanwhile, there was a class going on, unbelievably, at the New School, the famous New School for Social Research in Manhattan. And Leonard Maltin, who was pretty much unknown, although he had written the great movie shorts and the Disney films, those 2 books, and others, actually.
We had a fanzine, didn't he? Like
Yes, Film Fan Monthly. And
yeah.
he was, and I was a big, I was like a fan of his. I had gotten the Disney films that just come out, and I was like, oh my God, this book is great, because it had a lot of information about the Disney films and shorts and stuff, and I would love to meet this guy. And unbelievably, he was teaching a class at the New School on the history of animation. I said, oh my God, I have to meet this guy. I have to go there. Turned out to be a 4-credit class, meaning you had to be enrolled into this university to take it. But amazingly, they allowed you, a person from the outside, to just take the class. You just had to pay the tuition
to sit in.
It was like,
basically,
it was like $200. I mean, which you got to understand, $200 is like saying $1,000 today or more. Even, it was a lot of money, and I crazily did it. I did it because I wanted to meet this guy, and I wanted to hear what he had to say, and I wanted to see. I said, this is a thing I have to see. You have to remember, again, there was nothing like this.
Right.
And there was like less than 10 people in the class. It was very small. And I went to this day, I have on my shelf, I have the copy of the Disney films. I brought it with me, and I got him to autograph it. And he dated it. So I have the actual date that we met, written in a book. And we became friends, like, immediately. We became friends. And so he kept doing this class, and that's a whole other story I won't go into here. But we ultimately worked on Of Mice and Magic, the book, the famous, infamous
I got
Of Mice
2 copies of it. I have
2 of them. You got the hardcover?
Yes,
hardcover. I love
and
that.
That's the revised paperback, actually.
That is the revised paperback.
Yeah.
I
actually had the original paperback, but that's the one that I got in 1980. That, like, the corner is ripped off and the back is split and everything, because I looked at that voraciously for years. Yeah, that's how mine looks.
Is completely.
So the revised version is actually quite nice. I haven't dinged it up too much because I actually look at the hardback more often. But so you said a lot of stuff, and I wrote down a few things, and so I'm going to ask you a few things. So, and I do this all the time. I backtrack, and
I need you to do this so that someday, when somebody wants to know about my life, they can come to this.
There it is. There's the intro. It took 10 minutes, but that's fine. Anyway, okay. The amazing thing is your story is very similar to mine.
Yeah.
Although you got to flash forward about 10 years. I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to be an animator. But then I looked around and I saw the same basically shitty deal. I said, Rubik the Amazing Cube, is that the best you can come up with? I can't work on this stuff, you know. And it's like Disney was working on the Black Cauldron for 100 years, and I said
Right.
no. I didn't know they're going to have a resurgence in the late '80s with DuckTales and
Right.
Simpsons and blah blah blah, you know. So I kind of lived through our friends like Mike Cazala and Milton Knight. They went through what I could have gone through, but I'm glad I didn't in retrospect.
I met
But
Milton in the 1970s at those comic book. That's me and Milton go way back to
yeah.
those days. Go ahead. You were
Anyway,
saying-
so now you mentioned something on those early conventions that your grandmother clipped out the ad and said, you know, oh, look, you might be interested in this. My grandmother was the opposite. She was like, you're 10 years old now. It's time to give up the comic books, right?
Right.
No. You're 11 years old now. It's time to give up the comic books, right?
Right.
No. You know, if she was alive now, you're 53 now, 54 coming up in December. Giving up the comics books? No.
Oh
It's
my
like-
God. My grandmother,
what was she like?
I got to interrupt. I'm an interrupter. I'm sorry. My grandmother once came around that same time. She came downstairs. She was cleaning the house. I was visiting, and she said, maybe you'd like these. And one of them, I forgot what the other one was, but she gave me a copy of like Mad Comics. I forgot what issue. It's the one with the Western cover, that Harvey Kurtzman Western cover.
Yeah,
But
number
it was one of
9.
the EC comics. I remember looking at it like, what planet did this come from? I didn't know Mad was a comic book, and she just handed it to me. It was literally one of those, found it in the attic things. And I'm
Wow.
like, anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And
Good memory.
so was she supportive of all this, I guess? And your
My-
parents
no,
too,
yeah,
or
I
what?
mean,
I mean, it's
Oh
like,
yeah, my grandmother was pretty, unconditional love kind of person. She just sort of like whatever we were into, she was cool to support it. It wasn't, she just happened to be reading the Daily News, and recently on Facebook or the internet somewhere, somebody found the actual, it wasn't an ad, it was a newspaper article in the Daily News about a comic book conventions being held this weekend, and it was from a Saturday paper, and it mentioned that it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I somebody recently found it, and I somewhere on my computer, I made a screen cap of it, because that's the thing that really launched, as far as I'm concerned, it really launched me into this world. I ultimately did the movie programs. I started to collect film, like 16 millimeter film, and I ultimately, by 1976, I was doing the film program for Phil Suling at the convention in New York. I was like the film guy, and I did that for Creation as well in New York. Anyway.
what were the conventions like back then? I mean, obviously they weren't like San
No.
Diego is now with hundreds of thousands of
I
people.
somehow think you're old enough, and maybe I'm wrong, that you might remember how they were like, because
The earliest one I went to is
Tell me what
91.
year.
91. It was the first year they did
91.
it.
No, they were still small.
Yeah.
91.
Yeah, you could get around. Yeah.
Yeah. 90. I mean, to me with San Diego, it doesn't begin to get uber crazy till somewhere in the previous decade, in the early. I still remember going in whatever year Ghost
Like
World came out.
2006 or something. You know.
I remember whenever Ghost World came out, which I think was 2002, or I don't know when that was.
Yeah.
I remember walking into the convention on a Thursday, someone saying, hey, they're giving out free tickets to see Ghost World. Going over, the guy couldn't give them away fast enough. I mean, because nobody cared. I got the free ticket. I went over to the theater. I saw the movie. I mean, it was a different world. That was still in this. That was the 21st century. That's kind of that. Whatever year that was close to the end. Oh, another year. I'm sorry. I'm digressing. Another year that was close to the end. This shows you how small conventions were, in my mind. As late as 2005, I hosted. I can't believe it. I look at myself as an unknown fan, but Jerry Beck, hosted the Hall H Disney presentation, which was the things that were being shown and the people coming out were represented Cars, the first Cars, and that, what was the name of that Sky High, that superhero movie. I brought out the stars. I was the host, Jerry Beck.
Oh, so you brought like Kurt Russell and stuff.
After that year, somebody like me would never be the host in there again. It was always celebrities, or you had to be a famous writer or something. But up until that point, Hollywood hadn't completely embraced the con yet, but right at 2005 is sort of the
Yeah,
end.
that's probably about
So
it. Yeah.
but what was it like? It was weirdly
Yeah, way
enough
back in the early 70s. I mean, because you said it was kind of looked down upon. It was
when
better when I was a kid, but not much.
no, in New York City, okay, this is how I remember the first conventions of the late 60s and early 70s. There's the Pennsylvania Hotel in New York City. It's right across the street from not Grand Central, Pennsylvania Station, and Madison Square Garden on 8th Avenue, 8th Avenue and like 34th Street or something, 32nd Street. And you go into this hotel and people are doing their things, a big hotel. You go to the elevator bank because it's on the 18th floor. You go all the way up. People are looking at you weird. You get up to the 18th floor. The doors open. You don't see anything. There's no posters. And you walk through them glass doors. There was a room that had the panels straight ahead. No signs, no artwork, no posters, no fans hanging out in costume. It was nothing. And then the other way, you'd go in and there'd be what we'd call the dealer's room. And then you'd finally see old movie posters, just like today, old movie posters and lots of comic racks, very similar to what you'd see at Lee's Comics or whatever. I mean,
Okay, so it'd be like a small show today.
Yes, it would be like a small show, but the thing is, back in those days, there was no show. So the thing is, it was pretty amazing. It looked big to me, and I think us, even if there was only, and I found out later, 300, 400, 500 people, which sounds like nothing. It was 300, 400, 500 people who cared about the same stuff you did, and they were all there. By the way, another thing about the old conventions that was really cool was this lasted for a long time. I think it's ended now, but it probably ended again in the last 20 years. But there was a thing about in the old days where there was like this universal, like there was an assumption that everybody cared about all of this stuff, and in my mind, they were right. If you liked comics, you liked Carl Barks and Little Lulu and Superman and Kirby and Marvel and Warren and whatever else was going on, and you liked the Golden Age, and Captain Marvel and all this stuff. It was like assumed that you liked, that you were into it all, and you know what? You kind of got taken in by it, and you
were able to be in all of it. There wasn't so much that it was overwhelming. I don't think.
It seemed to me that everybody was into all of it because it all was part of the same world, a world that the real world rejected. That's one reason why not to go down on that subject, but that's how I got into the original anime, the old anime from those days, because that was also, there were a few people who were into that, and I listened and I said, oh, that's interesting, and I got into it too. It was
I got into it on the early stuff like Speed Racer and Kimba and stuff, but later on I just kind of said, not for me.
No, I agree.
But that's like everything else. It's like, I pay attention to what's going on, not as well as you do, which is a question I have for later. But it's like there's so much you have to pick and choose at this point.
Well, today's another world. I'm finally turning into the old man who actually, I love the way it used to be. It was actually easy in retrospect. But anyway, go ahead, ask your.
So you and I both wanted to be animators. I realized I didn't myself. Didn't think I was as good as anybody else. So was that your same takeaway? Why you changed, or was it more the industry?
It was both that there was no work. It was what I said before, and the fact that I was actually friendly with Dan Haskett. I'm still friendly with all of these people, and Eric Goldberg, who drew exactly the way he draws now. Eric Goldberg, Tom Cito, Dan Haskett. I'm probably leaving Michael Sporn in New York, a million other people, and I could see what they were doing, and I was nowhere. They were so nice. They still are, but they were really.
What do you draw like? I mean, in your opinion, I mean, like me, I could, on a good day, I could be close to like Sergio Aragonés or something.
Sergio Aragonés on a subway.
Because I don't think I've ever seen you draw. That's why.
Let's see if I can draw something for people. I'll tell you how I draw. I draw two ways. I'll show you my real style, and then I spent years trying to draw Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck so I can draw them pretty well. Let's see if you can. Okay, I'm just running out
Yeah,
of
I
time.
can see it. Yeah.
All right, let's see. I'm going to try
Oh,
something.
you're gonna do it that way. Okay.
I don't know how to do it. How else should I do it? I mean,
Well, you do it live, I guess, but I mean, you could do it on the.
I am doing it
Okay.
live, aren't I?
Well, yeah, but I mean, on the table and then lift it up. But okay,
Oh, well,
if it's easier for you.
can you see, can you
But you're
see
doing
me?
it. Hey.
I'm also somebody who I had the mistaken, and of course you color that in, but
Yeah.
you know, I
But
get.
like Mark Evan here, I didn't know he could draw, and then he
Oh, he's
pointed out,
really
"Oh
good.
yeah, I
He
can
can
draw.
let.
Here's a cover I did with the Looney Tunes back in the '70s," and go, "Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
he can actually letter too, which I find. There's my Daffy. Which
cool."
I'm also, and then I have this other way of drawing, which is my. I used to draw comics
It
in
looks just like
school.
Bugs.
Yeah, I used to draw comics. I draw everything fast and like I used to think like Kurt Swan and Jack Kirby just did what I'm doing, which is just drew, without having to do any through lines or anything.
Right.
Um,
That's the way I learned too.
I thought that's the way they drew the inked George Klein, Joe Sinnott version of their work. I thought was the way they drew. I didn't
Right.
know that it was. So I
Very
learned
sketchy.
in my mind to draw, just kind of draw everything exactly right immediately.
Yeah.
Kind of.
That's how I was.
Yeah.
It
I mean,
wasn't
that's
until
the
I
way
did.
I draw. But I mean, that's just it's. There you go,
Yeah,
Jerry
it wasn't
Beck.
until I took art instruction school that I learned the
Yeah.
proper way to draw. But
Right.
it's
Right.
still, my level was like here, and everybody I knew was like,
Yeah.
my hands off the screen. It's like,
Well,
because I know.
I also had a feeling that back then that I had this great feeling, especially when I started working for United Artists. I started thinking, you know what animators need? Because you got to understand, it was different then, and animation was so beaten down. I kept thinking, you know what animators need? They need support in the other areas. They're not film distributors. They're not, this or that. So I'm going to be their friend in another place. That's something I had in my head. And I've been able to do that throughout the years. When I was involved with Animation Magazine or many of the things that I've done, it's like I'm doing something that the animator themselves can't do. I'm helping them do it. That's part of what my whole life career thing has been.
Now, how did you become a writer? Because I mean, let me interrupt before you say it.
Okay.
In my mind, I never thought I would write anything because in high school, I hated writing. I couldn't stand it, and I realized because they made us write about books I didn't care about reading or writing about, and other creative writing things like write about this cup, and it's like I don't want to write about that cup,
Right.
So nowadays if they say write about Casper, sure, blah, 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 it's like so did you have the same epiphany like that?
Yeah, well, no, not that. It was part of it was out of necessity. It's like I wanted to. My first article that was ever printed was not in Mind Rot. Although around that same time I was beginning to do columns. I did little columns in Mind Rot, but my first actual thing, if anybody wants to find it, was in RBCC, Rocket Blast Comic Collector at Fanzine. And Don Rosa, not Don Rosa, he was part of it, but James Van Hise was the editor. And they were doing an animation issue, I had heard, and I wrote an article about Puppetoons. And I think that came out in 78 or so.
Okay.
I think. Actually, I probably was writing for Mind Rot before that. But that's like my first article that I wrote anywhere. And then I was involved with Leonard, and then I got involved with, then I started doing some books. The being involved with Leonard Maltin was for me and my college education on writing, actually. I saw literally how he wrote, and I watched literally him write, and I literally was in the room with him composing sentences. So I got to learn, and then reading his books over and over again, I developed what I call my own style, but it's really, I'll be deadly honest. I've told it to his face. I said, basically, I'm doing what you do. I'm doing exactly what you do. I noticed what he does, certain little tricks that he does. Like he seems to start most of his little pieces one way and he ends them another way. And I try to do the same thing when I write. He's my mentor as far as that's concerned. It's almost like necessity is all I can say. It's like I wanted this to exist. In the case of the famous, amongst many books here, let me see, like this famous one.
Oh, I have that too.
Plus, I obviously did a book.
I even have the old one too.
Right, the original. Right.
But yeah, I do have the.
We wanted those books to exist.
Yeah,
There was nothing like it, and we wanted them to be. So the only thing you can do is to write it yourself. And
yeah.
so that's
That's some of my books too. It's like
yeah,
there's no book about Dennis the Menace. I'll write one. There's no book
right.
about DePatie Freeling that besides this one.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
So I wrote one. Anyway, I told you I had a bunch of
That's
your
a book.
books there.
I feel free to ask me questions about any of that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's also a
There's
good plan to do.
answers to all the questions.
Yes,
That's all I can
yeah.
say. There's
But
plenty of answers.
well, I do have a Malton question since you said Malton.
Okay.
I met him once a few years ago when I did my Disney book, and he was very gracious and nice. He always seems like a nice guy when I've seen him on interviews and on Entertainment Tonight and everything he's done for 100 years. Was he that way behind the scenes and more? I mean, it seems like he's pretty genuine. That's Leonard. Very excited about everything that he does, and he's like, "Oh boy." Yeah.
No, Leonard's the real deal, and I feel bad about myself sometimes because I'm not as nice as he is. He's one of the nicest people ever. I'm not as nice as him. I'm I don't know what to say. I just he's what you see is what you get there. He's the real deal 100%. I mean, I think he'd admit to this if you've ever seen him on any early TV appearances and things. He was what we would all call later a nerd, way back when, before that term was ever.
Yeah. He was kind of golly all shucks. So I'm so excited to review this.
I mean,
movie.
he wore the suits and had the glasses and back then short hair, which meant it was very nerdy, and then he as he aged and the world changes, it sort of perfectly fit in with the rest of the universe the way he is. But he's what can I say? I mean, he's one of my best friends. He's a really, really nice guy.
Well, I mean, you and him were my heroes. That's what everybody who isn't here that would who's read of Mice and Magic would probably say the same thing. I mean, that book was the godsend book. I mean, prior to that, I mean, you mentioned there was nothing except for an occasional article or fun.
No, there was. I can tell you what there was just for this to be fanish. There was Joe Adamson's Tex Avery King of Cartoons came out, which Leonard edited. Leonard was the editor of that.
Yeah,
and then. And my good friend Leslie Cabarga did the Fleischer story. And I think, and not counting or counting The Art of Disney by Christopher Finch that came out. Those were the three main books that were out before Mice and Magic. And also, here's another trivial thing. The same year and month that Mice and Magic came out, unbelievably, I remember, this has actually been forgotten by me. I don't know if anybody, another book came out, the Gerald Peary, the American
the one with Woody Woodpecker on the cover.
Yeah,
that one.
That awful drawing that came out like the same week or
it's
something.
True.
We were like, what
and I have it too, but I didn't.
That was a weird thing.
Yeah, but and back then you could get all the books. I mean, well, for me, the most fascinating thing is when I used to look up things in the encyclopedia. So I mean, it's like.
But they would have like a panel from Nancy.
Yeah, it's something and it's like you'd look up like Walt Disney, and it's like, I didn't know much about Walt Disney other than I knew he died the day I was born. I've said this before, yes, the actual day, but. I didn't know how long ago the cartoons were made because you don't pay attention to that. I didn't, and so I was reading the Encyclopedia Britannica or something. It said Walt Disney, born 1901, blah 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 blah, and it says his first major motion picture feature film animated was Snow White, which came out in 1937, and I was like, oh, because my dad was born in 1938 and still with us, and I go. This movie's older than him? That's not possible.
Right.
Because I thought they were all made like in the 50s or 60s. I didn't think they were made in the 30s. And then I found out the same epiphany with like the Three Stooges. They had some show, and even my mom pointed out, it's like, oh, Mo Howard's going to be on this show. Okay. who's this old man? And it's like, I didn't realize how long ago a lot of these things were done that I was
I remember
liking.
feeling, I remember feeling that way. Well, with animation, it's a little easier because it really doesn't date. Meaning, unless
No,
there's
and I think
reference.
that's why it was a bigger shock.
Yeah,
That's why I said I thought, because I knew I saw Snow White in 1975. That was the reissue,
right.
and I knew it was a reissue, but I didn't know. I figured it came out probably in like 55 or something, 60, whatever.
Right.
I didn't know
Yeah.
dates, and it's like
No,
37.
no, they tried very hard to hide that. It's
Yeah,
like I collect the press books, and
yeah,
like the 19, like say 75 press, and they make it look like it's a 1975 movie with the ads, you
yeah.
know. It's when I teach, I'm teaching animation history, and I actually go out of my way with my PowerPoints to only show my students, in the case of the Disney films, the original advertising, original posters in 1937. I don't show them any later reissue. I know it's a weird thing. I don't say anything to them about it. We talk about the movie and I show the poster, but because I don't want them to think, I want them to know, I want them actually to think it's an old movie. I want them to think it's old. I want them to think it's some, this is what happened way back when, way before any of us were born. And this
True. Even my dad. So,
I
you know.
know.
Uh,
Next question.
Next question. Okay, so part of the reason, I said when I emailed you, I said, eventually I was going to ask you to be on the podcast. I just wanted to get a
And I
bunch
didn't.
under my belt and get, it's not like you're so special. It's just that, I get all the bugs out of the system before, And so, anyway, the other day I actually finally got this on Blu-ray. It was the Batman the movie. With Adam West and Burt
Oh,
Ward.
do
You're
I
on it.
appear?
I
Yeah.
think you're probably on the original DVD, not just this Blu-ray, but I didn't
No, I,
have
no,
it.
I think I'm only on the Blu-ray. I could be
Oh,
wrong.
okay. So anyway, I said, you're on everything. And it just made me think, and you kind of alluded to it either before the show or during the show, I'm interested in a lot of other stuff than animation, but that's what I'm kind of pigeonholed and everything. The other stuff you're interested in, you can rattle off other stuff you're interested in. I'm probably interested in most of the same stuff.
Yeah.
What happened in your career or whatever to kind of gear you towards animation more than, say, working at a comic book company like DC or working in feature films as maybe a director or something, just something different because you had these interests. You saw Batman on TV, you were all
Oh, yeah.
excited, you could have followed that path. You could have said, I'm going to work for DC and draw a Batman or
Oh,
whatever, so
I wanted
go
to.
ahead.
In fact, I heard you when you were talking to Danny. I think he alluded to, maybe he didn't, but I was actually one of those kids in New York, and I took the famous DC. DC had a tour
Oh,
in
wow.
their build of their offices in the 60s, and I don't know how long that lasted, maybe into the 70s. But when I was like 13 or something, I took the tour. I also went to Mad Magazine. I also went. They didn't have a tour, but they let you walk around. It was the weirdest free.
Was
That's where
this
I met
was this
Sergio.
on Madison or on Third?
Madison.
Okay.
No, for Madison for Mad,
Yeah.
and for DC it was 575 Lexington Avenue.
Oh, wow.
Before they moved to that Third, I've never been to that when they were.
No, Third. Mad was on Third Street.
Was it?
Like early 60s or something.
No, this was the what was that address? It was like 385 Madison or something like that. It was it's in all the books.
Yeah.
And I even went up to Marvel once, but like everybody says, I famously saw there was a door. You open the door, there was like one office, and there was a person, Stan's assistant. I don't think it was Flo Steinberg, and there was literally nothing to see. And they told you there was nothing to see, and so I just left, But I was that kind of a fan that would go visit the offices. But DC had an organized tour, and they allowed you. I wish I still had this. They allowed you to go fish through this garbage. They had a big garbage dumpster full of original art they were throwing away, but it was picked over, I assume, because the piece I had was like a Bob Hope page or something, and even then it was like one of those pages that's like only half the page, and they would have the ad for Tootsie Rolls or something.
Oh yeah.
So, but I had that for years. It was on my wall for years. This Bob Hope half a page, that I fished out of the treasure. I'm sorry to say I don't have it anymore. But the No, I mean, I loved comics, and I went up there and I saw Kurt Swan drawing and stuff. Oh man, I mean, I still remember all of this. The I don't know what you know what, fate just takes you by the hand in a weird way and leads you to what you're going to do. I say this now as an older fellow,
Yeah.
and I'm looking back now at what my life was like when I was
Yeah.
those days when I was in my early 20s, late teens. I had no freaking idea what I was going to do for a living, or where I was going to be when I was aged 45, or what was I going to be when I was four. I remember I'd say 45 because I figured out early on that 45 is how old I'd be in the year 2000. And I wondered if I'd still be alive to see the century change.
In the year two.
Yeah, I know. So I always wondered about that. And then finally you start doing stuff, and then you don't think about it. And then when you get older, you start wondering what happened. But you're right. It could have gone many different ways. Part of it was because I was in New York, and you would think that would lead me to comic books more. But
Yeah.
Actually you would, wouldn't you? I don't know.
Did you go to Harvey? Did you go to Harvey's office?
Never went to Harvey when it was in New York, although I had a friend. Who I don't even know if he got a job out of it. Me and a friend pitched a one-page like opening thing to Harvey, and it was rejected by Sid. I luckily, as you know, I got to meet and work with Sid years later. But I was friends with, and I don't know what happened to him, and I've heard some kooky stories if you're out there, Murad, but I was friends with a guy named Murad Guman. You probably know his name, because Murad, did a lot of stories for Crazy.
Yeah.
And his father was Sururi Guman, who did a lot of artwork for Cracked, right?
Well, I interviewed Murad 10 years ago, but that was for the Crack book, but I haven't really talked to him since.
This probably shouldn't be but was Murad working at Disney in New York, or where was he?
Geez, I don't even remember where he was, because I was just interested. It wasn't like this. It's not like this where we're just shooting the breeze for an hour. Yeah. It's like I was very direct. I said, "What did your dad do in Cracked?" And I asked a few crazy questions because
let me give you
he had worked for Crazy.
You might enjoy my story here, which is another digression. When I went to high school in Flushing, Queens, John Bowne High School.
I'm thinking the nanny now.
Yeah, no, and I grew up.
It's one of those crushing scenes. Anyway,
yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Anyway, when I went to high school, and I was already into comics, but it was, like I said, a secret. You couldn't tell anybody because they'd think you were nutty, And comic books, cartoons, science fiction movies. People forget that. That was part of the mix. If you like science fiction movies, you were crazy too. So you didn't tell anybody. So right. I was sitting in a class in high school, and I don't know how I was talking to the guy next to me, and somehow I mentioned something. Well, that's like those movies that Ray Harryhausen does, And the guy looked at me like, "You know who Ray Harryhausen is?" I go, "Yeah, do you?" I go, and like we ended up becoming friends, and that guy was Murad Guman.
Wow!
And so we became friends, and one day he invited me to his house after school to hang out, and Murad was making home movies, and he was also a really good artist, I thought, at the time. And I went over to his house, and he's like, I don't know how he somehow he introduced me to where his dad worked in the house. Yeah. Now, when you're a kid in the 60s or early 70s, parents didn't work at home. They went to the office, the classic thing. But his dad worked at home and had his own home studio. And then I went in it, and his dad was a cartoon. I didn't know this. His dad he had been the, as you may know, the ghost artist for Kerry Drake, the comic strip. Yeah. And he did everything but the heads, I think. I think Alfred Andriola did the heads or something. And Sururi Guman was a fantastic artist. And he was also doing the David Cassidy comic book for Charlton. I don't know if you knew that or not. He also did.
I think I did retrospectively, but no.
I actually think I'm not a big Charlton fan. It's probably my least favorite comic book company. But his comics, the stories he drew were the best. He should have worked for better, comic book companies.
Yeah.
And I still have, I think to this day, I still have a page of Sururi Guman, David Cassidy comics.
Wait, you have that and you don't have the Bob Hope? Wait, what?
No, I have that.
Did you sell it or did you drop that?
I don't know what happened to the Bob Hope. But
it seems like you keep everything, so that's
I do. I know. I also have my one page that if you didn't read about this on the line, you might have read this as I posted about it. But at one point, Murad drew me into the Battlestar Galactica parody he did for Crazy Magazine. If you can
Oh,
find the Battlestar Galactica,
I'll
you'll
have to
enjoy
look
this.
that up.
If you don't know this, Mark, this will give you a thrill. If you find that issue, and I know you've got it.
It's number 47. I know.
I think it's got the Wiz is the parody on the cover.
Well then that's 48. But 47
I
has
could be wrong. I think
47 has Battlestar Galactica on the cover.
Well, maybe that's the issue. It's the issue as a Battlestar Galactica parody.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm saying the Wiz. Maybe there's some other reason for that one. But anyway,
yeah.
And then read the story. The story is that they meet this crazy collector named Jerry, and it's me, and it's a character of me without my glasses,
and definitely
what I look like back then,
yeah.
and he did it totally, and he totally handed it to me. It was a complete surprise thing. I mean, it doesn't mention Jerry Beck or whatever, but if it was me. The character that it's supposed to be is me. Ridiculous. Anyway, and I think I have a page of that somewhere.
Speaking of Charlton, I know you didn't like it, but did you ever go to Charlton?
Oh God,
I know it was a derby. Yeah,
no, they were in Connecticut. They were a little too far for me.
Okay. I drove past where it was about 10 years ago when I was in New York last. But
Charlton fascinates me. I seem to like, so far in buying back issues of things, I like I don't even know what year they started, but I like the 50s stuff that they did. I'm not.
1945.
Really?
They had like one title, like Zoo Animals or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Slowly they were slow in getting titles. Not like the way things are now where everybody has like 50 books or something. It's like they put like one book out every other year, it seemed like.
I mean,
anyway,
they were a company that could have been something, and there were people throughout the years who tried to make it something, especially in the later years.
Well, their only advantage is they had their own printing presses. So, but even though they're kind of schlocky,
I hate that mechanical lettering they used. You remember that? They had that weird.
Yes. Well, I always remember you opened it up and there's like the little tatter at the bottom because it was almost like they're always at the beginning of a new paper roll every print.
Exactly. Exactly.
You gotta save every little square inch of paper. Like you can't make a nice clean cut.
It also seemed like they used the worst paper. There was just something funky about their pulp paper.
That was probably the mafia thing. I don't know. Anyway.
I miss pulp comics. There must be somebody today doing a comic book, but they're doing.
There is one company that's putting out like comics that are $1. Unfortunately, it's like nothing licensed and nothing anybody knows. I've bought a few of them, and they cost $1, and they're printed the traditional way with newsprint on the inside, glossy covers. I forgot the name of the company. I'd have to look it up. But I go, wow, if this got traction, it might be interesting. But anyway.
All right, what other part of my career, my so-called career, do you want to cover?
Well, I mean, you're also a Monkees fan. Did you ever have a band or anything like that? Or are you more like a fan than
No, I was a fan. I've recounted this a couple of times, but famously in my life.
Even Michael Ventrella had a few bands before he became a lawyer.
No, I wasn't. No, I all right, let me give you my quick origin of me with my love of Monkees. One day in 1966, we in my house, we had a black and white TV in the living room, and we had a crummier TV in another room, but we had the big black and white one in the living room. And my sisters I have two sisters, and they seemed to have control over what we were going to watch on most nights, but luckily we all liked the same things. One night, I wanted to watch Gilligan, as I recall. I believe Gilligan was opposite the Monkees, and
the first season.
And they kind of twisted my arm because they were already watching the Monkees, and I was like, "Oh, it's some girl thing. I don't want to watch this." I ended up watching it, and the episode I still remember the first one that I saw, which was the grandfather episode. So that I didn't catch it right from the beginning. That said, I still remember forever seeing the ads for the Monkees before they went on the air, that were the ones that were drawn by Jack Davis. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And so I thought, wow, Jack Davis. I even knew the name. I said, Jack Davis. I thought, this is cool. But I didn't watch the show, and they made me watch that episode, and I couldn't believe this show. And I every week when I watched it from that point on. I remember turning around to see if anybody else was in the room with me. Like, did you just see what I just saw? Because I couldn't believe this stuff. My favorite thing was that episode. I think it's the Chinese. Joey Foreman is the Chinese guy. The episode where maybe it's not that one, but there's an episode where Mickey, something happens in the show. Mickey walks off the set past the crew into a room where the writers are, and it's all these Chinamen smoking opium or something. When he gets his page and he goes back to the set and they resume. And I'm like, what the fuck did I just
It's totally non-PC nowadays, but it's still funny, I hate to say.
Back then when Gidget was the normalcy, you know, of TV shows, right? Could you imagine like Ozzie and Harriet doing that? I mean, nobody did that kind of thing, and it was like so subversive. And also, and of course, around that time, it was an episode where they turn into monkey men, you know, and they're flying off, and it was like, this is like a cartoon, but it's live action. I never saw anything like it. I'm like, I love this show, and I got so into the show because I love cartoons. So the show was like a cartoon to me, and I liked the music. I got their albums. I was a fan, and then like the rest of the world, I let it subside. The second season, I'm still to this day not a big fan of the second season or the second half of the second season. I know people who love it, and I can appreciate it and love it, and I can get into it as a big fan. But I prefer the original premise of the show, the first season and a half where they play a rock band that's out of work. I like that premise. And then, so I let, you know, the Monkees had died out. 1968 rolls around, and I've told this story too, which is, I saw those ads in the Village Voice head. I'm like, it didn't say the monkey, just the head, you know. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I'm 13. This is that age. 13 was the year that I went to Manhattan by myself a lot. I went to the Comic-Con. So November 1st or whatever date it was in November, I saw two things. I saw Yellow Submarine on its first day in Manhattan, and at the first theater it played it, where they gave away free submarine sandwiches. I'll never forget. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, at least in New York City.
They never talk about American things. I mean, I have to interrupt here. You know, on Yellow Submarine, they always talk about it being a flop. Well, it was a flop in England. It wasn't in the United States.
No,
but, you know, the story goes because whatever England goes, the Beatles go. Whatever, you know, whatever they say about the Beatles in England is what becomes the fact. And it's like, no, I think it was a big hit here. You know.
Well, on the flip side, whatever day it was, the same month in November, I decided I was going to see this unusual advertised movie called Head, even though I knew literally. Again, you got to remember, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have people leaking trailers, or there wasn't any of this stuff. Nobody knew anything about this movie. I didn't read the 16 magazines to hear about this upcoming monkey movie. I found out about that later. I just was going to see a freaky, weird 1968 Head movie, and I just went. I went like in the middle of an afternoon. I still remember it was raining out at the one theater. It was playing in two theaters in Manhattan, and I walked in, and I think it said on the marquee as I was going in, "The Monkees in Head," and I'm like, "The Monkees?" And I went in, and here's another thing. I still remember back in those days, I always tell my students this, nobody remembers this. Back in the 60s, people only loosely paid attention to what time a movie started. Like if it said movies, it was at 1, 3, 4. People back then, I was part of it. People just went into the movies whatever time they went to the movie, they got there. So I remember getting there, and you didn't care. That famous expression that we've all heard, that famous line, "This is where I came in." You've always heard somebody say that. That's based on people saying that in the movie theater because they see, oh, this is where we came in, and then they leave.
Yeah.
And my family used to do this all the time when I was a kid. And so I was just used to it. I came in, I still remember, I walked in the door, and it was the cheerleading scene near the beginning. "Give us war," right? You know, and I'm sitting there waiting to see what the story is, but no story ever emerges. It goes from one thing to another, right? And I'm like, this is like the craziest, like the same attitude I had 2 years earlier watching the earliest episodes of the Monkees. And I'm like, is anybody else seeing this?
So you're looking behind yourself.
I had the same feeling about this movie. I said, is anybody else noticing this movie here? this is like the most insane thing I've ever seen. And it's almost like the ultimate version of the TV show, or at least the first season of the TV
Now, how
show.
many people were in the audience? Was it a full house? Or
Hardly
very...
anybody. There were people. It was the first day, so they had this like group of people. I didn't really notice the audience, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
My mind was blown, and
Yeah.
I ended up seeing it 2 more times when it played. About a month later, it played.
Oh, I thought you just
local theater.
sat in the theater and just kept watching.
No, it played in Flushing, Queens, with the Love-Ins. That was a Sam Katzman hippie picture that just ran on TCM recently, and I watched it over again. Horrible movie. But so I went in for Head, then I saw the Love-Ins, then I watched Head again, and I bought the album, which I still have when it came out, and that the album, because as you know, it has almost the whole soundtrack, not quite, of the movie. That was one way for me to relive it, because again, no video, no VH, we didn't have any way to see a movie again, and it took years. I wrote to Bob Rafelson. There was an article about Bob Rafelson because he became famous later, 2 years later, with 5 Easy Pieces and King of Marvin Gardens, and there was an article about him in the Daily News in New York, and I said, I'm just going to write this guy a letter and say, because he mentions Head in the article. Oh, that was his first movie. I didn't pay attention, So I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back saying, "Oh, don't worry, Head will be around. It's in the vault." That's all he really wrote me. But it was like, because I was like desperate to see it again, and I thought, how would I? And then finally, it did show up 2 places. Mainly in New York City, there was this repertory theater called the Elgin Cinema, and they brought it back, and it was like, whoa. And anyway, I've been a fanatic for it. When I started collecting 16 millimeter films, I immediately was on the outlook, and immediately I lucked out and got a print of Head, Technicolor 16 print that I had back in the late 70s. So I was able to watch it over and over, which I saw that movie so many times. And so I'm a big nut on Head. I have a lot of the press kits and lobby cards and, and all the stills and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I got to thank you, although I think they misspelled my name on Andrew Sandoval, who I got to meet. He married a friend of mine, so I ended up meeting him, and I met him before his book came out on the Monkees, which I love. And he came over to my place, and I showed him what I call my monkey file, and he's borrowed a couple of things, just a few. He has everything, but he did borrow. I had a few things he didn't have, so he gave me thanks in a couple of places. But that's my only monkey involvement. One last thing I'll say though, just to be thorough. No, me and my friend Fred Velez.
Yeah, I was going to say you're friends with Fred. I knew that.
Fred and I met. Fred and I met at the Elgin Cinema at the end of the screening of Head. I was outside looking at the poster, just looking at it for a while, and this other guy was looking at it too, and we were both looking at it. And then it didn't even occur to me. And I finally, I don't know, somehow we struck up a conversation and we became friends. That was Fred. And then Fred and I collaborated on an article that was published in Video Review magazine somewhere before the Monkees were on MTV. It was like 1984, 85, roughly. And it was an article about the Monkees and with a checklist of all the episodes. And it was the only thing like that.
I think I have that. Is that like a little small?
It's Video Reviews. No. Video Reviews a regular full-size.
Okay, I think I have it or had it.
I have it somewhere. I have it somewhere, but when we wrote it, we were very proud because literally nobody had written publicly anywhere about Monkees for 10 or 15 years, and we like to think that somebody at MTV saw it and then decided to ask about it and put the Monkees back on the air. We don't know if that happened, but we'd like to think it. We were ahead of that. Yeah. But and so that's my only real monkey involvement. I did get to meet. I sold Peter a 16 millimeter print. So yeah, that's another thing. I ended up buying as many 16 millimeter prints of the Monkees as I could find.
Just episodes.
Episodes. Some of them, many of them with the original commercials. I ended up having, and that's all. A lot of these commercials that even you see Andrew Sandoval plays with at the concerts where it's they show like the Yardley commercial or some of the Rice Krispies. Those come from the prints that I believe they do. I believe they come from the prints that I had way back when, and I saved them. I sold Peter Tork his episode Monkees Mind Their Manner. I had a print of it, and I met somebody who knew Peter Tork in New York, and they said, "You've got that?" And so Peter Tork called me up and asked me if he could buy it from me. And I was like, how do I say no to Peter? I didn't want to sell it. But how do I say no to Peter Tork? I ended up, he sent me a check. I told him it was like $20 or $25.
Oh wow.
And I still have a Xerox of the check somewhere because that's the only thing I got out of it. So that's that. I think did I meet any of the other monkeys? No, not really. I mean, I met Mike recently at a book signing.
I've met all of them, but it was just fortuitous timing.
I saw
usually,
Mike and Mickey. My dream goal, I sat next to near Mickey, not next to
near
Mickey at the Stan Freberg tribute that was at the Egyptian a few years ago. And I
Yeah.
really wanted to go over there and talk to him. I was one of the speakers,
Yeah.
as he was. And so I thought maybe we could get to talk, and I couldn't, it was just not doable. But my goal this is my goal, I'll say it publicly. I've talked to people who know him. My goal is to get him on Leonard Maltin's podcast. And
Yeah.
for this reason.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Leonard about it, and Leonard gets it, which is forget about the monkeys. I want to ask Mickey completely about Circus Boy, and his father. His father was a big movie star in the 40s, and Circus Boy, he worked with Sterling Holloway. If you look at who was on Circus Boy, he worked with everybody.
Yes,
and it's like no one's ever asked him about that. I'd love to see that interview,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah,
I think they kind of delve in it a little bit when Mickey was on Gilbert Gottfried's podcast, but still, they were a little bit kind of raw Monkeys fans too.
Mickey has dropped a lot of hints. I call them hints in a lot of his interviews, talking about that past. Like one could actually go through every interview he ever did and actually compile some version of what I'm looking for. But my favorite one, and I forgot where this was. It might have been in his book. Where he talks about when he was on the Columbia Ranch, which is now Warner Brothers lot on Hollywood Way in Burbank. It's where the Warner Brothers cartoons studio is now. And that's where they filmed. That's where all those that street with the Partridge Family house and the Bewitched house and all that stuff is still there right now. And but he says in one of his interviews when he was doing the Monkeys that he had this relationship with the guard at the gate because he was the same guy who was the guard when he was doing Circus Boy, because that was filmed there too. I love that. I mean, it's like, wow, it's like he was the only one he had a history. Mm-hmm. I find that all fascinating, how they came together and all their different reactions to that situation of being the Monkeys is very interesting to me.
Now, since you generally know about like animation, the hangups and whatever of getting things released.
Yeah.
Is there one about Circus Boy that is preventing that from being released? Because I mean, you could market it as before he was a monkey, and I think people would buy it. I don't know if Columbia cares. Are they the ones that are?
That's probably the bottom line, is they don't care. But they do care enough that I believe they restored them, right? Weren't they?
Yeah, well, they restored everything. I thought they went one year and restored like the trailers and everything that they ever did, the newsreels and everything or whatever, And so it just seems like a no-brainer unless they don't have the rights.
Well, that's been the problem. As you just said, they restored. I'm a big nut for the old movie serials. They restored the movie serials. They restored the Scrappy cartoons. They've restored everything. But the problem is the people who do the restoration do it because it's shining up and keeping their assets available for, in theory, someone in some other part of the company who's going to sell it somewhere and do something with it. The problem is nobody at the other part of the company is doing anything with it. That's the problem.
That's so weird. See, I always said this, it's like, if I was running some sort of movie studio, example, it doesn't matter, and I found out John Wayne did one film for my studio, but it was a terrible, sucky movie he did when he was, really young or something.
Right.
I put that thing out day one. It's like John Wayne in this. It's like look, and I do it with.
I happen to be again. I don't mean to be. I'm not going to go off on these tangents, but one of my other things I've never written about or talk about is I'm a nut for B Westerns from the old days. That's a thing with me. And you just described exactly what happened at Warner Brothers. And you probably know this, that Leon Schlesinger produced, I think it was 6 John Wayne B Westerns in 1934, 35. And Warner Brothers owns them. And if you ever see any of the movies from the 30s that John Wayne's in, they all look like crap. But Warner Brothers, to their credit, a bunch of years ago, restored all the Leon Schlesinger, John Wayne B Westerns, and they're out. They're on DVD. I don't know if they're on Blu-ray, but they're easily, and they're on TCM. They look great. Those were actually his first starring westerns, believe it or not. People don't. I mean, he starred in some other. Well, it gets complicated.
Right, right. But you know what I mean. It's like, so, you know, I wouldn't say that Circus Boy would have been a high priority, but
No,
after 40 years of reunions or 30 years of reunions, and the Monkees are still viable in 2020, putting out a live album, and the two are still touring and stuff like that, you think, maybe we could put this out as a special set and get Mickey to do some commentaries,
yeah,
you know.
you would think, but as you know, I have a whole other career with trying to convince studios to do
Yeah.
stuff with their assets, I call them.
Yeah, well, I
And
know you said on Stu's show once, you said like animation's like the bottom of the barrel. So is TV like one notch above, and it's like,
yes,
okay, all
it's
right,
one
that
notch
answers-
above, one notch above.
yeah, okay,
In fact,
so
I'd almost say it could be like this because at least the cartoons are in color.
Yeah.
See, that gives them some. I mean the ones that are in color, that gives them some viability. Whereas TV shows could be in black and white, which is a notch down. And if it's there was one year I think I mentioned this on Stu's show actually recently, but there was one year about, oh my God, probably 20 years ago, where that I had cable. We all have cable TV, and I had WGN from Chicago. And there was a law. So I did talk about this on Stu, and somebody wrote in to correct what I'm saying here exactly. But there was a law that you couldn't, like, if Cheers, let me see if I have this right. If Cheers was on in our market here in LA, like on Channel 9, but they were running it on Superstation WGN, they had to, by law, change it if WGN was being, on cable TV and you could see it in LA, they had to change it so that the mask that half hour with something else.
Yeah.
So what happened what happened was, oh my God, it was glorious. They got a package from NBC or something like that. It was a bunch of old NBC and Republic owned TV shows. And it was stuff like Pete and Gladys, Captain Nice, My World and Welcome to It. I mean, I'm trying to remember the ones that I was watching, but it was like suddenly, in 20 years ago, there was this little golden age of these shows nobody saw except we saw them. Like, wow, that when they were running in the beautiful Cheers time slot. And I'm like, wow, this is great stuff. Anyway, I forgot.
Well, I mean, is that the same problem? Like, I don't know if Columbia is streaming anything right now because I don't know all the rules, but it's like,
no, Columbia's an oddity because they're not, Sony. They're owned by Sony. They're not part of Peacock or this or that, HBO
because
Max.
It just seems weird. It's like even Disney Plus, which I think they've done pretty well, but I think of all the years, Greg Ehrbar was on the last episode, we were talking about all the anthology episodes that they've never come out on video. They might have come out on tape, but they haven't come out on DVD. They're not on Blu-ray, and they were on Disney Channel 30 years ago, and then they're just kind of there. And you're saying, well, a lot of them have to be remastered, but then I have a few that have been remastered, and they're still not putting them on there. And it's like, it can't be that only Mandalorian and Hancock fans are buying this channel. I didn't.
Well, ye of, maybe I'm wrong, but I like to say ye of little faith. What I mean is, all my Warner Brothers cartoons. I mean, look, my attitude is they're going to put more of the old Warner cartoons on.
Because they've got to be searching for product. I mean, even Disney could like sublease using Circus Boy again and say, "Oh, we're going to put Circus Boy on Disney Plus."
No. I'm old enough to have seen this problem happen 2 or 3 times, and the problem is, unfortunately, the audience's expectations. What I mean by that is this: I remember this being this way with VHS, and then later with DVD, and now it's with the streaming services. Everybody expects everything immediately. Now, if we're up to me, you'd have everything immediately. But everybody expects it. They never put all this stuff out immediately. It sometimes takes years, but they eventually do it. I still remember when VHS happened. People kept saying, actually, they had the flip side. There was a perception that everything was out on VHS at one point. And people like me would go, well, no, that's not available. That's rare. I'd be telling people, you're talking about a film that you think it's out, but it's not. And then the flip side, I think with DVD, there was suddenly this this fandom for everything where everybody wanted it right away, and I get that. I'm there too, but
Yeah.
they don't do that. But I believe they will. I really do. I just, maybe I'm stupid. I just believe that they really will put out this stuff eventually. They
But I
just
mean,
bring out
using Disney Plus as an example, it's like, I'm always sent. I think it's a guy. I might be pronouncing his name wrong, but he's a Facebook guy. I think he knows you too, Antonio Marks or something like that. And he always CCs me Disney Plus stuff, the new stuff coming out, and invariably it's like another National Geographic documentary, another Marvel thing, another Muppet thing, and it's like, can't you kind of throw like I have, and this is the one I was telling Greg Airbar, I have the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh from the Disney Movie Club on Blu-ray. So I know that's been remastered.
Right.
It's not on Disney Plus. Why
Right.
not? It could take 2 seconds to throw it on there for Halloween. It's
right.
like, it's like.
By the way, it looks to me that some of the redos, remasterings are better than I've ever seen them before.
Oh, yeah.
On a couple of things that I've seen that I've
like,
noticed this on. One is
like watch Treasure Island. It's like, whoa, they
really?
like, it's like it's daytime. It's not like this muddy piece of shit like it looked forever.
Right. I mean, I'm a nut for Melody Time, and the Melody Time print on that channel is the best. And I'm not a big fan of Sword in the Stone, but it looks amazing on that Disney Channel.
All the cartoons look really good. They added Trick or Treat, the little short with Donald Duck, and whoa, it's like a brand new cartoon. It's like, granted they do computer coloring corrections and you don't see the brush strokes anymore. I get it, but it's like,
and I'm probably the only, they haven't put on, I have a mental problem that I grew up with. I was the right age, and I know how bad it is, but I'm a fan of the 2 Merlin Jones movies, and those aren't on.
I know,
but yet the Disney Movie Club put them out.
Yeah, and they're on DVD. They're not too bad. I mean, it's like, I don't know how much remastering, but they're that technology. I don't know. It's like how much remastering needs to be done if it looks pretty sharp on the DVD to put it on streaming. I mean, does it have to be 1080 or whatever for it to be HP?
I think
HD or whatever.
I think there is, but I'm not the biggest expert on that either. People think I am, but I'm not. I think there is. Okay. They're also, when they remaster stuff, at least my friends at Warner Brothers, what they're trying to do is they're trying to go one step ahead. They're trying to remaster stuff for whatever the next G that's the next thing that's going to come up for it. That's what they're doing. They actually did that a long time ago. That's why stuff is available now, because they actually remastered stuff 10 years ago that is perfect for now. But and the new stuff they're doing, they're trying to do it.
Now I'm going to ask a Stu type question, but it's actually one that, because he doesn't care about anything in the 70s or later on anything. It seems. No. Anyway, but for a while there, Warner Archives was kind of issuing just kind of haphazardly and randomly just any old Hanna-Barbera cartoon show from the 70s, 80s, or 90s, or whatever. So you'd get Roman Holidays, you'd get Chan Clan, you'd get, all this bullshit, crap shit. But I have a fondness for it because I was a little kid at the time and I wanted to see it. And so there's a few that are just like not out, and is there a reason for it? They just haven't got to it yet. Like Those Were the Days is one. It's a Waltons type of thing, and it's like, I never watched it as a kid. I thought it sucked, but I'm kind of curious to see it now, So is there a chance that these missing ones will be put out? Or
well, there's a chance. Look, I'm not the biggest expert on that. I had nothing to do with any of those, except I learned that the reason a lot of these random Hanna-Barbera shows came out on DVD or whatever format is because they were remastered for Europe. And so thus somebody in Europe, or the whole company in Europe, paid the money to remaster it, and thus it cost them no money to put it out here, and that's why they did it. Those were the days. Nobody had
done that one.
Why I was able to get them to put out, not that anybody cares, that I will never
I was going to ask about that. So
about Johnny Cypher and Dimension Zero. They look beautiful if you've looked at it. They are remastered because somebody in Europe, the Warner Brothers, got an order to do it. They spent the money. They did it. So it cost them no money. And believe me, it took me years to say, look, it'll cost you no money. It's already done. And they just did it at the, at the end of the rope here. They just did it to get me to stop talking about it. I really want them to put out the.
Well, are there other things like that, or can you not name show names?
Well, no, there's things like
shows that are remastered that they could put out, but they don't.
Another one that you may not care about that they did remaster and then didn't put it out for years. I bugged them about it. I'm not taking any full credit here, but I, like Johnny Cypher, I was like, why don't you put this out? And that's Marine Boy, whatever you think of it. But the thing is, they're beautiful if you look at the copies of it. But they remastered that, and they couldn't care less about putting that out. And when they started doing Warner Archives, they're a little more open to putting out stuff. If it's sitting there and it's not going to cost them any money, they're interested. They wouldn't have any problem.
I guess my main question, without revealing everything, because I'm not going to.
I don't have anything.
Is there a bunch of stuff that's just sitting there, that they could put out because it's been remastered, but they don't because they're just because it seems to me with a Warner Archives, if it's done, it's all print on demand, as it were. Right. So if nobody buys it, it's no great loss. I mean,
right? That's the Johnny Cypher story. You're talking.
Yeah, but they got one sale. I did buy the thing, so.
Oh, good! Oh, thank God! Thank God!
I justified the existence.
Justified the entire production,
and it wasn't that bad. I'll admit. I don't know why you like it so much, but it's not
funny.
That
bad. I like it from the flip side. It's hilarious to me. That's what I like it. In fact, and Sid, by the way, wrote many of them, as you may know.
Yeah.
Sid Jacobs.
And that was the reason I took a chance on it, because I vaguely remember it as a kid. Barely.
Oh, I didn't grow up. It didn't even play in New York. I saw it later and I couldn't believe it. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Anyway, I still can't believe that show.
I don't know. In New York, did you have a Kaiser television station?
No.
Oh, okay. Good. No. Well, you might know. I don't. When did you move to LA?
86.
Oh, okay. So that's a long time later.
No,
see, from 73 to 76, I lived in Palos Verdes, and they had a Kaiser station, Channel 52. And they used to play stuff like that. They played the bizarrest stuff, and there was a similar one which I eventually worked at later when Kaiser wasn't owning it, called Channel 44 in San Francisco, KBHK. But all these Kaiser stations, when they ran it, they would run all the same shows on all their stations. So you get Three Stooges, you get Speed Racer, you get Little Rascals, you'd get a Johnny Cypher, Huck and Yogi Casper, Popeye. I can rattle them off because they played them the whole time I lived down there, and it's like, and then when I moved back to Bay Area, San Francisco area, they played all the same stuff too, but I couldn't get Channel 44 as well. So, because it's pre-cable. So it's like, but that's where I saw a lot of that stuff.
Oh my God. Anyway. Those are the days.
But you didn't have a station equivalent like that in New York then?
Well, we didn't have that. We didn't have that one. We had Channel 5, WNEW. We had WPIX. Channel 11, those were the two biggies. And then we had Channel 9, which played all the weirder stuff. They were an RKO station, not Kaiser. They were RKO. And those were the three. Between those three and being in the biggest market, we got mostly everything. Johnny Cypher is one of the few shows that I believe never played, but I'd be hard-pressed to name another show. I can think of a lot of junk that played. Now, we did have also UHF stations that were like out in the boonies or New Jersey or way out in Long Island, and they played a lot more weirdo stuff. But somehow we could see everything. We even had in New York we had some Japanese channels on UHF back in the 70s that ran like the giant robot shows from that time in Japanese, and that's how a lot of us
Space Giants and
little stuff like
Ultraman and that.
Ultraman, Go Ranger. The original, I want to say like not the Transformers, but those giant robots. I forgot the name now.
Oh, Space Giants.
Well,
that's the one I know. It had Goldar and Silbar and whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, Mazinga, like Mazinga Z, right? Yeah. That kind of thing. Anyway, we had like everything you could think of was in New York for the most part. We didn't have any specific horrible local channel that ran all the weirdo stuff. It's like they all ran weirdo stuff. They ran them at 6 in the morning and 5:30 in the morning, and it was a golden age of junk. No wonder. That's why I ended up doing that cartoon dump show. That's why I collected that stuff. I've always collected those films on 16.
I'm surprised for Cartoon Dump you found things I never saw because yeah, I would seek out the weirdest stuff on
Well, I
TV
mean,
if I could.
I
Yeah,
was literally seeking. Well, actually, that comes, as you know, that comes out of my worst cartoons ever shows that I
right.
was doing in
Yeah.
San Diego, and and so thus I spent a few years. I already had my own collection, but then after doing it a year, 2 years, 3 years, I suddenly started going over to my friends and saying, well, "Do you have anything that's really bad? I mean, like funny bad, you know?" And people would haul out these things that I never heard of or nobody ever heard of. Sometimes they were pilots. Unbelievably, they had them. There were pilot shows that were the Mummy Nappers is one that comes to mind that I showed. That's all silhouettes. It's
Yeah.
silhouettes of humans against cartoon backgrounds. It was never. It was just one episode. I have it, and of course, there's something called what was it called? Bat. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's not a Batman thing. It was more of a Bat Masterson thing. I forgot the name of it now. But I mean, just incredible, weird stuff that I think I hit the ceiling on that. Though I kind of exhausted everybody's. I'm still looking for bad things. If anybody,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, some things I don't think exist anymore. Like, I wrote about in the Total Television book, they did the pilot apparently for the Colossal show, and
Oh
apparently
yeah.
Terry Toons did it. I've asked Ralph Bakshi years ago about that, and he says, I don't know, and nobody else seems to know about it. So it might not have been done for Terry Toons. I don't know, but there's a comic book and that's it. But
I
that's an
know.
example. It's like it just seems weird. It's just kind of
I predict
lost.
I predict it's in a vault somewhere, and somebody will eventually pull it out at some point. I think.
Throw it out.
I mean, there's stuff I've been running on Cartoon Research that, like, we ran, and again, I'm going to forget the names of it, but there was a Maury Amsterdam cartoon pilot that we found. I don't know if you remember that. I ran that. If we just put in Maury Amsterdam on Cartoon Research,
Okay.
it'll come up. But I mean, there's so many of these little pilot things
Yeah.
that never were.
And then was it you who discovered like the Howdy Doody pilot that Gene Deitch did, or was that somebody else?
Oh yeah, no, I was involved with
Yeah,
finding.
yeah. So I mean, it's like
Yeah, that Gene was the one who told us about it, and then there was a newspaper. We found an article about it in the Look magazine, and then our friends at the Library of Congress, luckily for us, UPA or somebody deposited a print there, and then they transferred it for us. They transferred it for me to give to Gene, but I ended up putting it online. Never give me anything. No.
And then there's like the Marx Brothers cartoon that was rumored to exist for Filmation, and then it did come out or whatever.
They ran in. Well, yeah, that was. I don't know about. I know it's around now, but I know that the print they ran at Comic-Con was Lou Scheimer's own print.
Okay.
And
I got it off of YouTube. I don't know if it's there now, but I just snagged it.
I showed there was this horrible Filmation thing called Dick Digit or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
what? There's good Filmation? Tell me about it.
There's good. No, there's no. Well, I used to run Rod Rocket. That's like I don't know. What's the best thing Filmation ever did? What do we think that is?
Story wise, I don't know. I would give to Star Trek because you got the real writers. The real writers.
I admit I like those, but that's the story and the acting. And
yeah, but I always said this. I've said it for years. It's like since animation does audio first, and you got the audio tracks, and you could do CGI and 3-dimensional. It's like you could reanimate them and look like live action now. With those old shows. Maybe take off the cheesy music that Filmation have, and put like fully orchestrated stuff.
They should do that.
I wish they would do it. It's only 22 episodes.
Well, the thing is, it'd be one thing not to do it if it really was crap. But they're written by all their good writers. Yeah. They're really good stories, and they're actually some of them are. I'm not sure if they're considered canon anymore, but some of them are. I think. I mean.
Well, they said that's where the holodeck first appears in the animated show, so you have to give it that if you're into Star Trek.
I consider that part of the canon for.
I do, it's like it's enough, it's like even if Gene Roddenberry himself said, it's like.
Here's another digression that we don't have to go into, but I was actually attended the very first Star Trek convention in New York City. I think it was in '72. and Gene Roddenberry and Isaac Asimov were the guests, and Majel Barrett was there too. And they ran two things that nobody had seen at that time. One was the opening of the Star Trek cartoon; it hadn't premiered yet,
Oh, cool.
TV. And the other thing was they ran, and this was all on 16 millimeter. They ran Gene Roddenberry's personal black and white 16 millimeter print of The Cage,
Oh,
the original pilot. And again, nobody at that time, again, remember this was
now it's all common. You can
right, so everything's common. It's on YouTube or whatever. But back then, it was like we were all like, "Wow!"
Did you show the bloopers?
They showed the bloopers. You're right.
Figured.
Probably in my mind's eye, it was also probably the best print of them ever, because I remember he had like they've been duped over like a million times.
Yeah.
He had like a perfect copy.
Yeah.
He had the bloopers.
One I asked you about on Facebook, and I think I CC'd you, and then you never really responded. But I'll ask now. Yeah. You went to the first Famous Monsters convention. What was that one like?
I don't have the biggest. I have the program book and I have the badge.
Yeah, well, that's why I knew you had the badge, so that's why I was like,
I went to all the. First of all, let me just say, I went to the Marvel convention, the DC convention. There was the Famous Monsters, which is really a Warren convention, is what it was. Yeah. That's coming back to me as I think about it. Mm-hmm. I don't have any vivid memory of it, to be honest. I mean, I know I was there because you know what? I think it was mainly about creepy, eerie, and famous monsters. And even though I'm interested in all of those things, there was a moment of convention overload. I think this was around 1975, 76, 77. I don't remember what year.
Well, 74 was the first.
Oh, 74?
It was 75 was the second one. There's
somewhere in that world, there was so many of these conventions suddenly in New York, it kind of got repetitious. It's hard to explain. Yeah. So that's my memory of it is that, it's another one of these things at that point. They were losing their special appeal.
Now, did you go to the 72 EC one also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I went.
Does that one have any memories for you? I mean, I've seen photos from it.
All I can remember is I'm not really anything special other than I know I was at the big panel that had like all the old timers were there. I remember seeing Wally Wood and all these people for the first time, and that was pretty interesting. I don't have any. I'm sorry. I mean, I was friends with, you may know the name, but I was actually very good friends, and I haven't seen him in years now. It was the guy named Fred von Bernwitz. Have you ever heard of him?
I've heard the name, yeah. He did the Mad Index, right?
Yes, he's very famous for being from back in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
He was famous for being like the biggest name EC fan. Yeah, he was like the biggest EC fan. And I believe he worked on one of those big EC history books that have come out.
Yeah,
maybe
he did. He did a nice version of the Index with Grant Geisman. So
yeah, I mean, if you know his name and you look him up, you'll be kind of impressed with things. But for a long time in the before I moved here, I guess in the early '80s, he used to come to my household. He was in the cartoons. He was I knew him as a cartoon fan, but then I found out later you're Fred von Bernwitz, the EC guy. But he's a really nice guy. I've missed him. I haven't seen him in decades now. Yeah. But we were friends for a while. I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah. I've never met him, but I've heard about him from different people. From Grant, I've met Grant Geisman a few times, so and he's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So.
Fred von Bernwitz. I mean, I have to say, I've interacted
name
with
dropping.
Yeah, I know. I like that. I like the fact that I feel like I've interacted with most of the big fans here and there, who've done stuff.
Well, that's a question. Is like anybody in animation that was around when you were like getting into it that you never really met, that you kind of I wish I met him.
The killer one I can dismiss in a quick sentence or two is let me put it this way. The person I really wanted to meet was Tex Avery.
I figured you'd say that.
I didn't meet Tex Avery, and I had the sad, or if not sad, I had the amazing experience actually of he passed away, I think it was in 1980.
Yeah.
I think. And in 1980, I came out to LA to go to the Cinecon, old movie convention, which was in Hollywood, which it normally wasn't, but it was in Hollywood. I forgot which hotel. Mm-hmm. And I was going out, and I had heard, it was in the air. Again, we had no internet. I don't know how I heard this. Maybe Mark Kausler told me that Tex Avery's funeral was going to be that weekend.
Yeah.
So I went. It's open to the public. Who knew who Tex Avery was? I'm telling you, back then nobody knew. He wasn't anybody. And so I went to Forest Lawn. I found out where it was. I was dressed up. I went to the
Wow.
reception. What's the word? It's not a reception, but
Yeah.
it's the funeral. It was the services. It was a who's who of everybody in animation. Hanna and Barbera.
Yeah.
I mean, Chuck Jones, everyone you can think of was there, and
Yeah.
they spoke. I mean, it was the ultimate fan convention in a weird way. People, I still have, they get handed out. It's not that great. I have it in my collection somewhere. This little thing they gave you that said funeral for Tex Avery, and Art Scott was the master of ceremonies. And it just says Art Scott, and it has the date on it. And it's something they gave people, and I still have that. And that was amazing. You know, the second amazing thing, and I forgot what year this was, I was involved with it. I was one of the people putting it on, was the Grim Natwick 100th birthday. You know about that?
Yeah.
You know,
I don't remember when that was, but
yeah, I don't remember exactly. It was over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
He died at like 101, but they threw this birthday, and literally anyone who was still alive, including people from New York, like I sat with Mae Questel. It was a banquet. It was done like a banquet. And everybody, all the old timers, everybody who ever knew Grim Natwick who was alive came to this thing. It was pretty amazing. You weren't at our, or were you at our June Foray thing that we did a couple of years ago?
I did not make it. I met June a couple times in her lifetime.
That was a pretty, that was all, not quite as, because a lot of the real classic people, she outlived everybody. So,
right.
you know, but that was, the audience there was pretty much a who's who today.
The last time I saw her was when in fact, I'll show the book I got.
Oh.
No, I bought that book.
Oh yeah, that book.
Peabody and Sherman one. And Gerald Van Sitters was there with June for his Jay Ward book. And that was a weird night for me. I don't know if I told you at the time, because I had to make the choice of going to that Rocky and Bullwinkle event because June Foray was there, or stay at Spurdback where I was because Stan Freberg was there.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't do both because they were not close enough, you know, even though I had my car, unless I just said hi, bye, zoop, and go to the other. And so I had seen Stan before, so I said, okay, I'll live. I like June, and I haven't seen her in a while.
Right.
And
I mean, you know, I think you made the right decision, but that's
my fonder memory with June is when her book came out that Evanier and was it who else?
Earl Kress.
Earl Kress. Thank you. I was going to say Mark Kausler, whatever. Yeah, Cazala, but too many cases. Anyway, when her book came out, my Total Television book came out at the same time, and just luck of the draw, he sat us side by side to autograph our respective books. So I got to talk to her for a while. So that was pretty cool. And
it's neat. That's great.
And it was at Van Eaton Gallery's booth in San
Diego.
Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah.
Back in the days when you could have a booth in San Diego.
Yeah, those days. We'll be back to that eventually. We're all having a timeout. We're having a universal timeout.
Yeah.
You know, the world has to catch up to the Marvel movie timeline, which is 2023. Remember, 5 years later, we have to catch up to that.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking, on the pandemic thing, it'll just be, because I studied the 1918 one when this one started, and it's like, it's probably going to be like 2 or 3 years, but there's no real conclusive evidence of how it ended. It just kind of stopped, it's like, it's like it just kind of affected enough people and it was done. And it's almost like that's going to happen this time, it's just eventually just more.
Walt Disney actually got that flu that in 1917 or 1918. He actually came down with whatever the pandemic was then.
Yeah, the Spanish flu is what they call it, but it's like, wow, I didn't know that. I know quite a bit about Disney. Maybe I've read it before, but I didn't think.
Oh yeah, look it up. Yeah. He actually had it. A lot of people had it.
But the one thing that I also started studying, and I don't know if you did, is I go, what happened to movies during that time? Because now they just closed all this.
And
it's like Charlie Chaplin. Apparently, he had a couple in the can, and they moved the release date later, just like they're doing with, say, Wonder Woman now. So
the reason, the thing is that movies weren't what they were even 5 years later. Then movies, feature movies, were really a new thing at that time. So it wasn't, it wasn't exactly the same. That said, I forgot if it was the Hollywood Reporter, but someone wrote an article about movies during that period, and it was exactly what you're saying, which is that movie theaters closed, and then when they reopened, people had to sit apart with just like today with masks. And there's definitely stories about movie theater owners claiming they're going to go out of business, and there's an article that somebody wrote, and I think it was in the Hollywood Reporter about it. So you can look that up and find it. There's
and there was a couple celebrities, I forgot which ones, because I didn't think we were going to talk about this necessarily, like that came down with it, other than Walt Disney. And then, the famous one, which I don't want to, I'm like, Stu, I don't want to bring him up, but I'm bringing him up. Donald Trump's grandfather actually died from it, but you'd think he would care a little bit more. Anyway, since someone in his own family died from it, but it's like, anyway. But
any other questions for me about my illustrious career?
Yeah. Let's see what I had. One thing I always notice is whenever you're on Stu's show, a lot of this is based on when I see
me being on Stu's show and not being able to answer questions.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, let's wait for the next email, or anyway. No, okay. You're more in the industry than I am, obviously. So you always seem to see like every animated film that comes down the pike, almost, if not
almost.
Are you like obligated to see all these films, or do you just get free press passes and you go,
a combination of all of that. Part of it is my own perverse fascination with seeing as many as I can. I'm more interested in the features than series TV, strangely enough.
Right.
That's why I did that book, The Animated Movie Guide, that I need to update. Desperately.
I have that one too.
Sure that one. I'm fascinated with animated features.
That one.
That one, yeah. And
is this the newest edition, or is there?
There's only one edition.
Oh, I didn't know if you had two.
Yeah, I need to update it.
Right,
but so I'm fascinated with that. So it's part of in the beginning, or way back when, whenever that was 15 years ago. I mean, seeing everything was a mission I had, that I wanted to see every animated feature. And then you're right, because I do blogs. Because I'm in a ASIFA Hollywood, ASIFA. That's the group that does the Annie Awards here. We give out an Annie Award for Best Animated Feature every year, and I don't know if you know about the Annie Awards, but you should look into it. We put on this great event, and the industry takes it seriously.
Yeah, right.
Actually, they do take it seriously. It's real. It's a great organization that like all the animators are in, and we all vote on
I still think Klaus should have won, not Toy Story 4.
Too,
anyway.
I agree. I think it won an R award. I'm not sure, but the thing is, no. So as part of ASIFA, and at the moment, I happen to be holding the title as president of the group. I will not be the president of the group for long. We're gonna bring in somebody else. My term limit is up. Unlike I will leave gracefully from my presidency, but but as part of that, I deal with, and my websites, I deal with all the studios. I get invited. You're right. I get invited to all the films, and part of being in ASIFA and voting on them, you kind of have to watch as all of them in order to properly vote for the nominees. So that's the reason, that and my own personal love and fascination for it.
I mean, I don't like to be such a stick in the mud to say, I don't like any of these remakes, or I don't like it when they, I never say this. You will never hear this from my lips other than me saying what other people have said. Because they put out this new version, it ruined my childhood. It didn't ruin my childhood at all. I don't have to watch it. And even if I do watch it, how could it ruin it? I still have the original. I don't know.
I've been saying that for years. When everybody talks about remakes and things, I'm like,
but the one I actually saw yesterday, and that's why it kind of made me write this down and bring it up, is so on Netflix they had the Woody Woodpecker film that came out a couple years ago.
That's horrible.
And I actually like parts of it. Not everything, but there's a couple laughs. It had the requisite fart jokes and stuff like that. But I mean, it's like is there something like that? Like, I assume you saw it then, right? Or
I have it sitting right there on my
oh, you
shelf.
own it. Okay.
Well, I have a
Yeah,
copy of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And but I mean, is there just something you just go, no, I can't, I can't. Even with a free ticket, I can't. You know.
Wow. No, I think I've seen all those movies that I later or even before, like I didn't want to see Dumbo, but I felt I had
I
to
haven't
see
seen that yet, and it's
Tim
on Disney
Burton's
Plus.
Dumbo. It's
So
horrible.
yeah,
Don't see it.
yeah. That's
And
why I didn't see it because you said it was so bad. It seemed depressing. Yeah,
I mean, I mean, all I could think of is, and this is Stu related, is that Yogi Bear movie,
yeah.
which isn't really that bad, except Yogi is so horrible looking, I can't look at it. You know,
Well, I
probably
equate the Yogi Bear movie with like the Woody Woodpecker movie.
if
There's
they went back
moments.
in, and did the Sonic the Hedgehog thing and redesigned it and
Yeah,
put the movie out again, it might be a better movie.
yeah,
That Sonic the Hedgehog movie wasn't that bad, by the way. I saw that.
yeah.
Um, no, I mean, there's movies I can't stand that are remakes of things, but no, I,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure there is something, that nothing in advance, meaning nothing before I saw it. It's like Tom and Jerry the movie. Like after I saw it, it was like that was horrible.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I'm not a big fan of the here we go the Jetsons movie.
yeah.
I'm pulling.
I liked it at the time, but then watching it later because I got it on DVD,
Yeah,
I said I like the titles, the main titles,
yeah, me too. I
and then
agree.
I found out, again mentioning Greg Ehrbar, he said that they wanted to put a Tiffany song to open that film and not the titles, and it's like, oh my God, it would make it even worse.
Yeah, it was a different world. It was a different. I'm looking at my shelf to see if there's any films that I can remind myself that I don't particularly like. But I don't know. I'm sure there is. I've seen so many things I can't remember anymore. I have to think about
Yeah,
literally look at a list of titles from my book to
yeah.
remind myself.
Oh yeah.
I used to say for years the worst animated feature ever was, get ready, it's not anything you're thinking. It's that Betty Boop for President, or Hooray for Betty Boop, that colorized Betty Boop movie.
I
That's
have
the
that. Yeah.
worst movie that somebody tried to peddle as a real movie. That's really bad. There's a
I
lot
got
of
it when it came out on DVD just because they had I think it was Bush and Gore, as the
yeah.
ballot. So that's
there's
about the time it came out on
there's
DVD.
there's a lot of movies that came out like 10 years ago, as late as 10 years ago, movies by what's the name of that company? I remember seeing in a screening room that this movie that I don't recommend at all, called Trumpet of the Swan. It's horrible. It's like a TV
I've
movie.
heard of it. I don't know if I've
Yeah,
seen
it's
it.
it's
I
by
might
it's
have.
by that it's the guy who co-directed um sorry, having a brain freeze. The Disney film, there's a guy who co-directed Fox and the Hound and The Black Cauldron.
Mm.
And he went off and had his own company. He's also,
What, Bluth? Don Bluth?
it's not Bluth. It's
Oh,
it'll
okay.
come. It's one of the directors of that. I'm sorry. Your audience is screaming out the name right now in front of me. I'll get it later. That guy
It's
has
okay.
he's the guy who made The Swan Princess.
Okay.
That company has made a bunch of junk. Probably Swan Princess is probably the best thing they ever did.
Yeah, I think I saw that one and wasn't terribly
It's
impressed.
just another Disney ripoff,
Yeah.
kind of Bluth-like movie. The worst Bluth movie is probably Rockadoodle, with runner-up being maybe Thumbelina, in my
Oh,
opinion.
wow.
Those are horrible. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Good animation, but really, really
Yeah.
didn't make sense.
Well, I always thought that about Bluth stuff, except maybe the American Tail films. Most of his
Yeah.
stuff, most of Bluth's stuff looks good, but just like
Well,
Secret of Nim. I remember when I saw Secret of Nim, I said, "Wow, this looks really good." But I wish I thought it was more exciting.
Well, yeah, Secret of Nim. I keep thinking has a third act problem. I say that because I was at United Artists back then, back in the day, back in '82. I worked for United Artists, and I became friendly in 80, 81, 82 while they were making Secret of Nim. Became friendly with the studio, and I got to come out to LA, and I got to meet the studio, and I did publicity work for them. And I still remember that I'm still friends with them. If they're watching, I love you guys, Gary Goldman and Don Bluth. but I haven't spoken to them in a long time. But the they used to show me, they would have me out and they'd show me the first 2/3 of the movie, and I never saw the end of the movie till it came out.
Yeah.
And and that was so good that they did that, because I thought it was great. I thought the first 2/3 were fantastic. If you just sort of cut it off at a certain point, it's really good.
Yeah.
But then it just falls apart somewhere before the ending where she's rising the stone with magic and all that. Like somewhere before that, they cut it. All that stuff after at the end kind of ruins the stuff that comes before it.
That's one of those ones, and I'll mention another one that's that way. But I will tell you after you give your answer. I was going to say, are there any movies that you loved or at least liked when you first saw it, and then you revisited it later and said, wow, this is really crap?
Well, the closest one I mentioned earlier, but I didn't go in depth about it, and I haven't actually completely rewatched it yet, but I'm going to, because it's on Disney Plus, and that's unbelievably, it's Sword in the Stone. When I was a kid and I saw it as a kid, I love that movie. I love Sword in the Stone. I came out, happened to be 8 years old in its initial release. So I saw it at the perfect time. Plus they were publicizing it. Walt Disney's still alive. I mean, I thought it was magical. I thought it was great. And then I watched it like 5 years ago or something like that. And I was so surprised how much I didn't like it and how cheap it seemed to me. And I'm so happy that Disney, his last film that he supervised was Jungle Book, thank God, because I would hate to have seen him go out with Sword in the Stone as his last. At least with Mary Poppins and Winnie the Pooh even, and Jungle Book, he leaves on an up note, in my opinion. But Sword in the Stone,
I don't think I hate it as much as you do. I saw it when it was
there's
early 80s reissue, so I was like 14, 15 or
there are
something.
other Disney movies that I hate more, and that said, I remember the first time I saw all of these, I liked them, but in retrospect, as time has gone on, I've grown to hate them. One of them is a fan favorite, Robin Hood. I really hate that one. Boy, it's at that nadir period of.
Is it because they reuse so much animation, or it's?
Oh, because they reuse so much reuse of that. It's so cheap. It's so cheap. And I remember somebody at the time, I remember a criticism literally at the time, a friend of mine said to me, like in the movie, you're supposed to be scared that he's scaling the wall and you're afraid. It's a cartoon, he's not going to die. I mean, I remember a friend of mine saying that to me, and it like broke sort of some kind of a spell. I'm like, hey, yeah, you're right. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the movie that I think, and I'm not one to ever say this as a historian, but the movie they could erase from their filmography, and that would delight me. That would make me happy. It's become a fan favorite, unfortunately. The Black Cauldron. I really, really hate that movie. I hate it. Hate it.
I never liked it on first release. I wanted to like it.
Yeah.
I really wanted to like it. And there was a time when it came out, I think I kind of said, well, it's better than Fox and the Hound.
Right.
But looking at it again, it's like, no, it isn't.
It's derivative of Sleeping Beauty and a whole bunch of other stuff. You can see where the management fiddled with it by adding the fair folk, and the whole thing is a mess, in my opinion. And
that's one that reduced down. Secret of NIMH is one, and then the third one I was going to say, now people love this film too, and I still love the opening 5 minutes, is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's like it used to be way up here, and now it's kind of like the live action.
Well, I think
good. There's moments,
I think you might change your mind in time. It may take another 10 years, but I think you'll change your mind.
But I loved it when it came out. Now
I loved it when I first saw it, and then almost immediately, because being an animation nut, I saw it many, many times.
Yeah. Almost
immediately within that year or two, my opinion of it died down, because I resented. I thought this is what I remember thinking. I said, I really didn't like that they're trying to bite off so much here. They're trying to do not only what classic cartoons are like, but they're also trying to do a film noir parody. It's like they were trying to do so many things in that movie. And it's like they should have just done one thing and played it straight. That's what I thought. That was me. And didn't like the movie because it was trying to be something. It just didn't make sense to me. I mean, it did make sense, but it didn't make sense that they would, if they had just done it what I call straight, it would have been a better movie, I thought. Now that said, as years have gone by, I've grown to really like it, and I can see what they're doing, and I've flipped around back to liking it a lot now.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I felt that way at one point.
And seems like there's another one that was that
Oh,
way.
I'll tell you a movie that I saw and really liked when I first saw it, and I hate it now, and it's an awful movie. And it's animated. You ready?
Okay.
All right. You ready? It's not Disney.
Okay. I have another one too, and it's not Disney.
Okay.
But go ahead.
And one could say this about this man's whole career, but it's this one movie, and it's Wizards.
Oh!
When Wizards came out in '77, and as I like to say, as a trivia question, I tell people, I go, 20th Century Fox released 2 fantasy movies in 1977 that both featured Mark Hamill. Can you name the other movie? And the other movie is Wizards.
Yeah.
But the Wizards, in 1977, again, 70s, animation, nadir, nothing's going on.
Right.
And so Wizards comes out, and it's rated R or something. It's like a ripoff of Cheech Wizard. It's like, it's got stuff in it that nobody's doing. Yeah. Okay, I could still say that, but in retrospect now, especially now with what's come ever since, it really looks cheap. And the story is pretty bad. It's just bad. But it was better in its day and in that moment. But
you could say that about a lot of '70s films. I don't even think Fritz the Cat's as good as it once was. Or
well, that's true. But
Watership Down, or Lord of the Rings, or what's another one? Fantastic Planet.
No, I got to say this. I worked at United Artists. I'm trying to interweave my little career here. But I worked in United Artists when Lord of the Rings came out as well. That's when I started working there.
Yeah.
And I hated it when it first came out. I hated it. Hated it. It was boring. I didn't think it told the story well. Not that I even knew the story, but I just hated it. And of course, it has a cliffhanger ending or something, and there was never a part 2. Right. Anyway, so unbelievably, I was forced to watch it again on the big screen because I was going to interview Ralph. This was a couple of years ago here in LA. Mm-hmm. They asked me, would I come and interview Ralph? And it's after a screening of Lord of the Rings. Oh, brother. So I went to the film, watched it over, now having seen the Lord of the Rings live action movies, now knowing more about it, now looking at it totally in retrospect, haven't seen it in 30 years or whatever, 40 years maybe. And I'm sitting there going, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. It's weak. It's not as bad. So I'm sorry, Lord of the Rings is a movie where my opinion of it has grown. It's still not great, but I remember hating it. That's fine. I don't hate it now. Sorry.
Now, one that's gotten and I thought you were going to say this a few moments ago when you said this guy's a real cult status now.
Yeah.
But you didn't mention it. You said Black Cauldron instead. I thought you were going to say Space Jam.
Well, you're right that it's beloved now.
Yeah. What's your opinion about it? I mean, I've kind of gone through a love-hate on it too. I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
Right. I think I'm with you on that. The when it first came out, I kind of didn't like it, but because I'm not a sports person and I couldn't care less. Yeah. And I didn't like the Monstars. I didn't like their character design. I thought it didn't fit with the Looney Tunes designs. I thought there was some great animation. I thought there was occasionally a good joke here or there. It was a watchable movie, but I didn't love it. I'm actually kind of hankering to see it again. I want to kind of see it again anyway. But I don't know. I guess long story short, I ended up on. I didn't care for it on the big picture of things. That said, I don't think I have to see it again. I have a feeling I'm not going to hate it as much.
Yeah. And then what about the later one, the Back in Action?
I'm a fan of Back in Action. It's a little kooky. Yeah. I remember I mean, it's almost got a bad rap. I don't know why anybody's,
Yeah.
got a problem with it. It's got some great stuff in it.
I like both of them for the kind of the same reason because I mean I was like a purist for a while there. It's like Bugs Bunny by anybody other than Mel Blanc, blah, and then
Yeah.
I've kind of gotten over that because enough time has passed. It's like, well, you're not going to have Mel Blanc anymore. You got to
Right.
use newer people, and some of the newer people have grown on me,
Yeah.
So uh,
Yeah. I mean,
there's moments in both. I mean, I
yeah.
think on Space Jam to defend that one over, I think I give the nod to Space Jam a little bit more on Back to Action. I like Bill Murray in it, and
Yeah.
actually, Michael Jordan, even though he's a sports guy, actually does a pretty credible acting
Right.
job considering.
No, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. I agree with all of that. There's some good things in it. I, I,
yeah,
I mean, now that enough time's gone by, we can look at it's easier to assess these things when lots of time has gone
yeah. Well,
by.
that's why I asked the question. It's
Yeah.
like, has
I,
any
I mean, I
changed?
think that I think Back in Action will be appreciated more in the future.
Yeah,
It's a little too in jokey,
yeah,
but it's a little too. It assumes everybody in the audience knows the characters and the jokes and some of the things, but I don't know. I like it better. I was actually on the set of it one day,
cool.
which is cool.
Did you meet anybody like Steve Martin or anything? Or
No,
oh,
I
okay,
know. I didn't. I met Joe Dante,
cool.
but
Well, that's cool.
and I was in the set that has, it was like one of the like a laboratory that has all these, the things for where they have the creatures are in the lab. I'd have to look at it again to remind
Yeah,
myself.
yeah. Yeah, I don't
I, w-
remember
I
all the
once I
things, but
once got I once got on the set of, because I'm friends with Frank Conniff, who's my partner on the cartoon
oh
Dumb
yeah. Hmm.
show, TV's Frank, and he was a writer on Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Oh,
So
the
so
live action
the
sitcom, that
live
one.
action one, which
Okay,
is a pretty
okay,
good show actually.
yeah.
And I got to one day he just let's meet him for lunch, and so I got to go to the set and watch them actually shoot a scene. I forgot what scene or what episode, but I was watching. I that's a rare. Believe it or not, that's rare. I don't know if anybody thinks that's what I do all the time or have ever done it, but I don't. And
What
but
do you
to
do all
actually,
the time?
but to actually be in a Hollywood, it was at Universal, to be on a Hollywood lot in a Hollywood soundstage, watching them shoot with cameras. A scene from, it's not a movie, it's a TV show, but it's pretty close. I thought that was pretty cool.
Mhm.
I don't know. That rarely happens. I
Well,
think
actually, that makes it me think of something. Is like you had that one cartoon you did called Hornswiggle way back when. How
uh,
actively involved were you on that? Since that was
very
your
involved.
baby, so were you there every day, kind of like directing it, or okay?
I wasn't the official director. My friend Rich Aarons was.
Yeah,
The My friend Tom Cito was involved. Earl Kress was involved. Um, but I literally had an office at Nickelodeon for at least a month, maybe it was 2 months. I was there every day.
yeah,
But and then even when I wasn't there, before and after, we were working on storyboards. We were reviewing footage, and to me it was super exciting. It was probably one of the. I have several highlights in my crazy life. That would be one of them.
hmm,
Was because I was a showrunner for what I call a day, even though it was like 2 or 3 months. I was a showrunner for a month. I got to feel what it's like to run a cartoon production and involved from the beginning. Voice Rene Auberjonois, who recently passed away. He was the lead character. I hired him. I auditioned him. Amongst many other people, and I was the producer. I was the head guy doing it. And if it had gone to being a series, I would have been the head guy or something. But
yeah.
it was a offbeat, one-off thing. And
I was gonna say, any
uh,
more projects like that ever coming up, or is it like
well,
it doesn't have to be that character, just
no,
anything like that,
no. Well. On the one hand, no, and on the one hand, maybe, because no, I mean nothing at this moment. I'm teaching mainly this at
Yeah.
the moment during the pandemic, but and I'm writing and I'm doing other things, but I am pitching something. I'll try to hint it without. Let's see if I can't give it away or not. It's a long story, but it would be with Nickelodeon, and it would be I'll also say it's a revival. It's a reboot, and which Hornswiggle was. I mean, I'll tell you a quick behind the scenes on that, that was me trying to reboot Sydney the Elephant, which
Right.
in retrospect, that sounds like that makes no sense whatsoever. But I had people who were willing to listen to me,
Hmm.
and we actually spent a year. It is not easy to sell a show and do this sort of thing. So for 1 year, once a month for a year, I forgot what year, I guess it would be 2004 or something like that.
Yeah.
I went in once a month. I went in every month to see producers there and the people there, and I would pitch a version of this Sydney thing. And they said, okay, we like it, but could you do this? And okay, so you go back, you come back the next month, you do that, you pitch it again. Earl Kress being involved was part of that. They wanted me to get a writer that they had known.
Right.
Okay, they knew Earl, so I got her. Earl's my friend. So they also, same thing with the director. It was like that book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
Yeah.
The first thing was me and the horse, and by the 12th time, it was the parade. It was like we had 16 people in the room, and we had a storyboard, and we had everything. And this is the thing I'll never forget. I've told this story to people. I'm not sure I ever did it recorded, which is that I went in with 16 people in the room and buzzers and bells and all the stuff, pitching it. Here's the story. It's Sydney the elephant. And I said to everybody in advance, because this just happened to me 12 months in a row, they're gonna say something at the end. If they don't say yes right there in the room, they're gonna say, can you just do this? Yeah, and then we're all gonna have to come back next month, because that's what happened for 12 months in a row. Mm-hmm. So back in again, and here's the thing. Oh man, talk about me having, if I ever had self-control, this was it. They said, could it not be Sydney? Could it be not that character? We looked into, Viacom. We're part of Viacom, but it's going to be a problem. It's going to be an issue. Could you change it? And you got to imagine, we're invested in this really heavily, and it's like, well, gee, if you wanted it to be another animal, we wouldn't have written this story. We wouldn't have done this. We wouldn't have done that. It would be it would have come up with something completely different. But we went down this road because we were doing Sydney the elephant. Yeah. As well as you could change it. Now they did imply that if I changed it, they didn't say this, but they implied that if you change it, we're there. Yeah. But they didn't say it that way. Yeah. But so literally I sold the gang. We all went out to the diner. I said, okay, let's redo the boards. And I said, you know what? They don't want Sydney. I don't have to change the art direction. I don't have to change a lot of stuff. All I do is change the character. And I had a friend. I was gonna scream at people. I really was, and I was gonna scream. People were telling me, don't hold back, because if all they're saying is just change it, then maybe we have a shot. And and then anyway, and as long as I somehow decided on a rhinoceros, because I wanted to keep the same exact script and the same character and the same look. And so and then another friend of mine, a guy, I'll give him credit right here now, named Bill Vallely. I forgot if he gets co-credit or not. He should have. I think he does get a co-writing credit. I think I, in order to pay him, Bill, if you never heard this, in order to pay you for your co-writing, I had to take my name off of it because I co-wrote it too. And the only way to pay Earl, and they only had enough money for 2 writers. So I jumped out because I was getting it for being a producer, right, a creator. And so we changed it. And Bill Vallely is the guy who came up with the name Hornswiggle. Oh, okay. Like Hornswoggle. And I went back in with that. And then they finally said yes. That was like a big thing. And then I had this great roller coaster ride of the whole production of it, which was really a wonderful thing. I had been involved without going into it at all. But my history is pretty rich in all this because I was a development executive at Nickelodeon and Disney at one point, and a TV division. And so I was working in the business, and I knew a lot about it. And I knew a lot about how to do it. But to actually sit in that seat and to do it, was a really thrilling thing, because you're the king, and anything you say goes. I've learned a lot. There were things in it then that I would redo if I could, and I would redo certain things in it. But I never, so far I haven't had a second chance, unfortunately,
Oh,
to be in that seat. I am uh, um, pitching something. I guess I'll have to be
well, I
cagey.
mean, my
Yeah.
final question, so yes, there is an end to this. No, was just what are you working on, and what are
Oh,
your upcoming projects, pandemic or not? So,
yeah. Because I stupidly, well, I I love teaching history of animation. It's like a little dream job. Except that I'm like anything that you love, you can be you can be drowned in it. Let's say you love chocolate, you can drown in chocolate. I'm drowning in the chocolate of teaching, uh, I because of the pandemic and remote teaching, it turns out there were some more opportunities to teach beyond my immediate area,
right.
like Laguna Beach, and I actually have a school friend of mine who moved to Tennessee, and every school around the country has animation classes now.
Mhm.
And a couple of these people asked if, they, knowing I was available, contacted me, said, do you want to teach remotely with our school? I'll go, okay. Of course, you get those offers, people coming to you, you're going to say, yes, I do. And so I just said, oh, this is kind of cool. I could actually make a lot of money teaching in all these schools, and I paced it so I'm only teaching like one class a day. But I went too far, and I'm teaching a class 5 days a week.
Oh, geez.
It's too much. I've learned it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be, I've already got these classes prepared. I've got the PowerPoints. I've got all the videos transferred to MPEGs, and
Mhm.
I figured out all these ways to do it. But there's a lot of work involved, and the thing I didn't think about was the grading. Grading the students and stuff.
Oops.
It's a lot of stuff, a lot of papers to read, and it's really hard. So I don't recommend doing that. Don't do what I did. But
Or
I'm
as much.
teaching. So mainly I'm doing fine during the pandemic. I'm teaching and doing the blogs, and um, I'm actually doing some freelance stuff. But all of that is, is not even something I can actually mention on like I worked on the Bugs Bunny 80th Blu-ray that's coming
Right.
out.
Oh, here's another book plug. Yeah, I don't have the newer version, but I mean, you have the updated version of this
Yeah,
one. Yeah,
I have the newer version
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, yeah.
It's not even a newer version. It's the same book. They
Well,
just
new
took.
cover, right? Is like has a red cover or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The, I'm doing that, and I have a couple of things. Like I said, I'm working on this pitch with collaborators, and I'm hoping to sell them on this idea. I think it's a good idea. I think it makes complete sense, and we'll see if I can get anywhere with it. And I do have some book ideas, and I'm futzing with them. I don't know if one of them is an update of the animated movie guide, and the other one is a book I mentioned that I wanted to do on my blog, which is a book related to the Academy Awards and cartoons. And outside of that, that's keeping me crazily busy right now. I do want to show you this show and tell that I have in my
Okay.
thing before we hang up. So you
Oh,
can go,
quick,
wow.
okay, quick question before you show it. Cartoon research.
Yeah.
You had your friend Kevin Scott Collier, is that his name?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's done a number of books for you, but now there's a dry spell. Or is there any more coming down the
No,
way?
no. Let me explain this. I'm being deadly honest here. I am an honest. I'm not hiding anything from anybody.
Yeah.
No. First of all, I don't make one penny from any of those books. Number one. Number two, I recommend all those books. They're great. I don't know if you bought any of them. They're really
About
super
all of
good.
them.
You bought
There's
all of
like
them. Good.
17 of them or something, you know.
Really? I'd have to go
Yeah,
count them. I have
something like
them.
that, yeah. And they're all
Aren't
different sizes.
aren't they great? I mean,
Yeah.
what happened was this. I'm going to quickly give the origin of that. What happened was Scott sent me a book he had done. He does lots of books on all
Right.
sorts of subjects.
Yeah.
And he's in the Midwest, and he had sent me out of the blue a book he did that's not a cartoon research book, that was on Winsor McCay and Winsor McCay's birthplace, right?
Yeah.
And he sent that to me, and I looked at it, and it was so little thin, and I'm like, and it was small, it was cheap. And it's like what's in there is too big for a blog post, but it's too small for a real book. You know,
Right.
it's right in the middle. So, but strangely enough, I had the thought years ago. Actually, this is borne out. I can prove it. I had a thought years ago when I was doing Cartoon Brew. There's a name I don't mention anymore. Um, but when
I
we were
wonder
doing
why.
when I was doing Cartoon Brew, we actually did a mini book. Most people don't remember it, or if you bought it, it cost a lot of money. It was like a lot of money. It was a book. I have it on my shelf. I can go get it. It's called Inside UPA. It's a
Oh,
little mini book. You know what? Let me
I don't know if I have that one.
just for show and tell.
Yeah, since you're doing show and tell anyway, get the other one too, or whatever.
Here it is. The reason most people don't know it, it cost something like, I can't remember if it was like $45 or 60. I mean, this is how
Oh
famous.
wow, I don't have that. Yeah.
And if you look at it, if you go inside it, now Amid actually did it, although I created the title. It says down here, Cartoon Brew book.
Yeah,
See?
yeah. Uh-huh.
So the idea was that we had this idea back then of doing these mini books. And this is actually a great book, but it's mainly pictures, but it's very cool because it's lots of pictures taken by people who worked at UPA at the time. So you almost feel like you're inside UPA. I'm the one, again, I don't need to dwell on the fact that I created the title because we had no title for this book for the longest time. And I said, why don't we just call it Inside UPA? Because that's what's in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that was the thing. I wanted to do these little mini books. You know where this idea comes from? You'd appreciate this. It comes from I had two sisters, as I mentioned, and they were teeny boppers, and they watched the Monkees, and they bought Tiger Beat magazine, and they bought 16 magazine, and of course I read them because they were there.
Yeah.
I didn't buy them, but they were in my household. And I remember, if you look at those ones from the 60s, particularly the Monkees, I think they did this with the Beatles and they did this with some of the others. They would have, I don't know, again, I can't remember if this was 16 or Tiger Beat or both, but they would have there'd be a page that would say, send away $1 and you get 4 little mini books. And one would be all about Davy.
Yeah.
Right? All about these little mini books. I think my sisters bought them and they were ridiculous because they were mainly a little 16-page book of photos.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's any words in those books.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what the girls wanted anyway, right? They just wanted the pictures. So, but I love the idea that this magazine was selling these mini books, this little extra thing. So one day I thought, back in the Cartoon Brew days, I thought, I got a great idea. In addition to what we're doing, why don't we came out with these little mini books? That I don't know. I just thought that would be a fun idea, maybe a way to make money. You may not remember this, but early on, this is even before Cartoon Brew, I think. I could be wrong. Back when, because I had started Cartoon Research, the website. Get ready for this. By the way, I'm digressing, folks. This is only for my absolute killer, have to know everything fan.
I can do that. I'm gonna get a drink here.
Oh, please. I got my water right here. The Cartoon Research was something I started up in the 90s, and I didn't know what it was even going to be. It was just a company that I wanted to have in my mind. And in the year 2000, I started as a blog. Or before there was, the word blog didn't even happen for like 2005 or something. But it was a website. It was not unlike Mark Evaniers' website where there was articles.
Right.
And there was news and stuff. And hang on a second. So somewhere in that early period, the early version of Cartoon Research, Ruth Clampett, who's a friend of mine, Ruth, who does, her daughter of Bob Clampett,
Yes.
And at that time did limited, I think she's still doing it, a limited edition artwork, animation artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And she did this fantastic box set of cells from Porky and Wacky Land.
Mm-hmm.
And in the box set, if you bought the box, beautiful box, and inside with 4, matted cells from Porky and Wacky Land. And in addition to it was a little booklet, which I don't have handy. You may have seen it, or maybe you have it. It's a little Porky and Wacky Land booklet.
Yeah. I think she showed that on Stu's show when she was on there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He had this booklet, and when I saw that booklet back in the year 2000 or whatever year it was, my jaw dropped because I said, Ruth, because that was my idea of a mini book. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, it's a booklet all about. She had model sheets, she had
Yeah.
stills, she had text that talked about it. I'm like, this is I wanted to do this for like every Warner Brothers cartoon. I
Yeah.
wanted to see this for Coal Black, or or some other thing. I wanted to see just this booklet. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. And she did it really well. Paper it's on and everything is beautiful. And then sometime around 2005, this is years after she sold those as a limited edition.
Mhm.
One day I was visiting with her and she had a couple books out. And I said, Ruth, remember, I love that book. That book is so great. I'd love to, figure out a way to do books like that and sell them to my readers. And she said, well, if you'd like, Jerry, we stopped selling these things, and I've got about 75 of them in the back room. If you want them, you can have them. I said, what do you mean I can have them? If I had them, I would sell them to my readers. I'd charge them money for it. I mean, you want me to, because you can, Jerry, you've done this, well, not to pat myself on the back. You've done us so many favors. Just take them. You'd be doing me a favor to get them out of the room.
Cool.
I put them on, I'm sure somebody listening to this, I put them on my website I forgot the amount. Like, I want to say $15, but it might've been less. It was somewhere, it was like 10 or 15, I think. And they sold out like that. It was 75 of them. They just sold out like that. I knew they would. And I don't think anybody, I may have had a couple of people where I had to say, I don't have any more.
Yeah,
but so I knew from then that, oh my God, if we came up with these little mini books, I know we could sell 75 copies with no problem.
Right.
So anyway, Kevin sent me that Winsor McCay book, and it was like a mini book. And I said, oh man, I love these. And I said the same thing to him. I said, I love this thing. I said, I'd love to see books like this to sell just on my website directly to my audience. You don't sell it anywhere else except here. Or maybe you can put it on Amazon. I just made it. I said that like that. I didn't really mean anything. And he's like, well, if you want, I want to do, and he was asking me what kind of books, what would you want to do? I said, well, I do one on Tom Terrific. And I don't even remember what I said. I remember the Super President one. I had the press kit for that. I said, I have the press kit for Super President. No one will ever write a book on Super President. So, and, at one point we were collaborating on ideas for them, but that's about my only involvement. He essentially, and I would loan him stuff from my collection sometimes if he needed visuals. And no, he basically did these books on his own. I mean, I would know what they were in advance, but and he put my name in them and he put my logo on them and everything. And yeah, the idea was we're selling them just through the website, but he made all the money off it. That's fine. I don't know if there was any money to make off it. I remember him telling me once.
I bought one copy.
He told me one of the early ones that I thought would not sell well. I forgot what it was. He was telling me hardly sold any, like 13 copies or something.
Like Dreamy Dud or something.
Yeah, but those are like they're what is it? Book on demand? Print on demand?
Yeah.
Like maybe I don't know anything, but did that, besides the time he took to research it, write it, and lay it out, did it cost him anything to actually print it? No.
Unless you print one, unless you want to buy one, yeah. It's just
even I bought them. I didn't get them for free.
Yeah. So I mean, if you just wanted to put it up there as an ebook, let's say, it would cost you nothing. I mean, it's like
I had a couple of people who asked me, like, what's the deal on publishing those? I have some ideas, but I'm not the publisher. I'm not doing that. He did it all on his own. That's the true story on that. So, I haven't heard from him since the last one. He's probably writing other books about other subjects.
It's been a while, but it's like he was turning them out pretty darn fast.
Like what?
I think the last one
once a month, pretty much.
There was one about either the Wizard of Oz or someone about Russian cartoons. I think that was the last one he did.
Wow, I don't even know if I remember that.
I got them all. I told you.
He did the one on. Well, I guess I had to advertise them on. I had a blog post.
He did Tom Terrific. He did Mighty Heroes. He did Quisp and Quake. You just said Super President.
He did. Didn't he do a Clutch Cargo one? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I got another book that you didn't do, but I thought it was interesting. He did a book about the Marx Brothers Love Happy movie, so I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. So I got that one too.
Right.
Because most people don't like that film, and it's like,
right.
Okay, let's see what he says about it, and he actually likes it. So Hey,
Yeah. Well,
anyway.
you gotta write. You gotta write. I'll tell you. I don't know these guys. Maybe we know each other through the internet. But the two guys, I'm sure you have this book, the Columbia Comedy Shorts. Do you have that book? It's not cartoons. It's a McFarlane book that lists every of the Jules White, all the Columbia Comedy Shorts.
Yeah, I actually don't have that.
Oh,
So
you should look for. I don't know if that's of interest to you, but
no, it would be. It's
yeah,
Jules
no.
White.
Let me say at the outset, it's a good book, and people should, if you're into that, you should
Yeah.
have. Of course, it lists the Three Stooges, but it lists everything else beyond what Leonard listed in his great movie shorts. It's Andy Clyde, and they list everything, and they talk about everything. Here's the problem with that book. I love hate that book. I actually like it. I'm on the love side of it, but the problem is, obviously these two guys, Ted Akuda and I forgot the name of the other guy, Watts, I think. They apparently were big Three Stooges fans, as we all are.
Yeah.
But they seemingly don't like anything else that Columbia put out except the Stooge shorts. It seems to me when you read this book. And so you're reading a book that's really well researched and really thorough with the filmography and everything is in there. But these writers don't like what they're writing about. You know what I mean? They love the Three Stooges. They're basing everything else that was done at that studio on the Three Stooges. It's a weird book, and it bothers me because I like people who love their subject. There's a lot in the subject you don't have to like, but you like the subject. And they seem to not. It seemed like they dug a hole.
I mean, using one of my books, like let's say DePatie Freeling. I didn't like everything they put out, but I'm not going to sit there and badmouth the Houndcats, let's say. I actually like the Houndcats, or what's the one with the roller skating one? I can't. Bailey's Comets.
Bailey's Comets. Yeah.
I left that up to like Art Leonardi and Barbara Donatelli to say it was a bad show. I didn't want to sit there and say it was a bad show. Right. It was a bad show, but it's like, in the grand scheme of things, it's like I'm not going to sit there and say this is awful, don't ever watch it. And if it did ever come out on a video release, hey, I'd buy it.
The TV animation of the 60s, 70s, 80s that we all grew up with.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of, from my generation, we all looked at animation as starting in the teens 100 years ago, going up with Disney up to a certain height, and then sinking to a horrible level, by the 70s and 80s for me, from my point of view.
Yeah.
And, but now as another 40 years or more have gone by, I'm beginning to see the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s TV animation as an equivalent in some ways to the silent animation of 1917, 18, 19, because that animation is really limited animation. Back in those days, and great things came out of it as time went on in the history of animation. And I kind of think that's what's going to happen when people look back, ultimately, that this weird TV era, this post-Disney era, starts in a crummy place and then gets better, because it already has.
Well, that's what I was asking earlier about Warner Archives, if there's more of that Hanna-Barbera stuff. It's like at the time I couldn't give two shits about it. But, now it's like I'm fascinated with what Filmation did and what DePatie Freeling did and what Hanna-Barbera did in the 70s and 80s. Because it's like it or not, they had the product, for lack of a better term, to continue to go and make Saturday morning memorable for generations. It's like, even if I personally didn't like a particular show, somebody else did. I didn't like Monchi-Cheese, let's say. Somebody else probably did because they were 3 years old when it came on the air, whatever. It's like, and so I don't know.
I still remember, this is a weird memory to have, but because I was obviously what I call a grown up in a kid's world when back in the 80s, for example. I still remember being the animation fanatic I am still today, and as I was then, going to a matinee screening of Secret of the Sword, the He-Man movie.
Yeah.
And again, grown-ups didn't do that in 1986 or whatever, 85, whatever year that was. They didn't even play it at night. It only played like daytimes, like matinees. And as the person I am, I said, I got to see this movie. This is before I was running a CIFA and doing all the things I do later. So I went on a Saturday afternoon. That was a big mistake. to a matinee screening with hundreds of little kids, boys with plastic swords.
Wow.
And when sitting and watching it in that part was good. They were watching it in rapt attention, so I could watch it. I was just watching it because I wanted to see everything. And when it goes, I have the power, the whole audience in unison, like Rocky Horror Picture Show, was, talking along with the screen. So let me show you this last thing, and I think we're kind of near the end of the session, don't you think?
Yes.
All right.
So show me your surprise.
We can have a part 2 like Mike Ventrella.
Yeah.
The only one.
No, there's been other part 2s. And you can return. This
is my vault.
What is this?
What is it?
You have to bring it up to the camera because I cannot see.
I
see your Merrying Melodies poster. What's this other poster here? I can't even see it.
Oh, that's
another sparkling cartoon delight.
Yes. I have 3 volumes. I was at a flea market in New York in the 90s, and the guy had, I don't know how many volumes. Maybe you're going to tell me you have this, or you have something like it. You probably have one for Harvey. When I worked at Harvey, you know that. When I worked at Harvey,
yes.
Jeff Montgomery had every Harvey comic bound volume.
You were on Baby Huey's ass. You posted it the other day.
I know. Yeah, I was. So I was at this flea market in Manhattan, and this guy had like a whole bunch of these books, and you can see where I'm going. And I looked at him, and I only bought 3 of them. He had like all of them, but it's bound volumes of Cracked.
Wow.
Now it's like,
wow.
Like, I've got bound volumes of Cracked here for you.
That's a hard issue to find, the one with Frankenstein on the cover.
Oh, really?
Anyway.
Unfortunately, this particular one is missing 1 through 5 for some reason. But the other ones,
it's just random. Yeah.
No, it's missing 1 through 5 and 16 through 20 for some reason. But then it has 21 through 30, and then let's see. And then I've got it looks like I've got them all. Nope. I bought 3 volumes, and the final volume ends with 41 through 50. So, these are the ones I grew up with when I was a kid in the 60s. So these are nostalgic for me.
But they're also, those issues are pretty hard to find, those issues. Yeah. Yeah, because Crack never was a big seller until the 70s. It just kind of kept going somehow. And in the 70s, when they did like a zillion Star Wars issues and Happy Days issues and Laverne and Shirley, whatever, then they started selling pretty decently. But back then, those are actually pretty hard to find. So it's not a Mark
Arnold podcast if I don't hold up a copy of Cracked. No, I actually bought this on the newsstand. I still remember that issue. It looks like number 50 ends at 1966, which sort of makes sense. I now, in retrospect, wish I bought maybe one more volume, but I bought the earliest ones the guy had, and they're treasured. They're right next to my bound volumes of Mad, Russ Cochran versions.
And the Cracked ones, was that from a former staffer, or was it just a guy?
I didn't even ask questions. Clearly, it was a staffer or somebody who worked there, and they were clearly either he stole them or they were being thrown out when the offices closed or something. He just put them out on a flea market. So I lucked her out, and I got them. And
I would have snagged them up.
Me, they're prized possessions.
Well, at a local bookstore here in Oregon, I got a Mad one that was actually bound copies that a local library put together.
Wow.
And then they just discarded it. Some local used bookstore had it, and it was very cheap. It was like $5. Yeah, I was like,
I think Stu has a couple of bound volumes of TV Guide. As much as I like having the original issues as is, there's something cool about bound volumes.
Oh yeah,
don't you think?
I don't have any bound Harveys, but I've seen them. And I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Frank Hill, who did Dennis the Menace for a number of years, but he at his house, he has like a complete bound set of every issue he worked on.
Wow.
And I said, "Ooh, I want those," and he goes, "Nope."
I have, and I'm wondering where I've got them. I think they're in my garage.
No, it is cool to have bound copies,
Well,
even if it's unofficial. If
here's
it's just
here's a
yeah.
story that I don't know if anybody out there will actually care at all. But one day when I lived in New York in the early '80s, and I was walking I lived in the Village, and Forbidden Planet was the big comic book store on 12th Street and Broadway, and I lived on like 13th Street on the other side of town. So I would, on Saturday mornings, I'd just walk across town to go to Golden Apple. And one day I'm walking by, and there's a dumpster, a big giant dumpster, big. I mean, so big you can't see over it. It was big, and as I'm walking there, and I forgot how I found out what I found out was maybe I saw somebody in the dumpster, and I sort of like decided to look over and see what's in the dumpster, and it was books. And somebody said, "Oh, they're throwing books out from the library. There's a library here. I didn't even know it on this street, 12th Street." And I said, "Book? What kind of books?" He goes, "Oh, they're like magazines." I go, "Huh?" So I went into this dumpster, and when I say went into it, it's hard to explain. It was literally like I want to say a baseball field. That's not what it was like, but literally 6 people, more than that, could be in this thing, and
Huge dumpster. Okay,
it's hard to explain.
like a truck.
It was like
Yeah.
it was unbelievable. It was gigantic, and it was all junked. It was all junked, and what it was bound volumes of magazines, and I took as many as I could. I have a bunch of them downstairs. I was smart enough. These are some of them were magazines we don't care about, but the ones that we did, like it was Popular Science. But the one that I cared about was they seemingly had every issue of Good Housekeeping. And you might think immediately, well, who cares? But remember, Good Housekeeping had those Disney pages in them.
Yeah,
In
it
the
depends on how old it is. Yeah.
right. Well,
Yeah.
I found all the 1930s ones that had all the Disney pages, so I grabbed those. I still have those. Anyway, I'm just saying, that still to this day haunts me that somebody threw these away. Valuable.
I'm sure it happens all the time. Libraries say, "Oh, we put it on microfiche," or it's old. We don't need
Oh,
it anymore.
these days with
Yeah.
scanning and stuff, there's a lot of people throwing away good stuff, which is
Yeah.
sad.
Anyway,
All
all right. On that note about throwing things away. All
Well, that
right.
was fun.
Last question.
Next time we'll talk about Harvey. You go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. You thought I was going to talk all about Harvey, but anyway, I have other interests myself. So anyway,
purposely.
you can interview me next time. But anyway, it's like, how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you? Or you could say, no.
Yeah, don't reach out. No, my email is on the contact page of cartoonresearch.com. One could check out the Cartoon Research Facebook page or the Jerry Beck Facebook page or Cartoon Research on Facebook. I'm very accessible.
All right. Very good. I thank you, Jerry, for being my special guest. Finally got you on the 90th show. Woo!
Hope we didn't bore you. Yeah.
It might be 90 and 91. I don't know. It depends on how, but anyway, appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Anytime. All right.
Thanks a lot, Jerry.
Bye-bye.